Welcome back to another story on Horcrux Harry. This time, we're bringing you. Fleur and her sisters both recognized Harry as Veela mate at age 9 and magic bound them together. Your likes fuel our creativity. Subscribe and stay tuned. Here's the story. Chapter 1. The compass finds north. The Dursleys didn't take Harry to Diagon Alley because they wanted to. They took him because Dumbledore had sent a letter, polite on the surface, iron underneath, reminding them that a magical child required magical supplies, and that the responsibility of guardianship included, at minimum, ensuring that child had access to his inheritance vault. Vernon had gone red in the face reading it. Petunia had gone white. Then they'd both looked at Harry the way they always did when magic became unavoidable, like he was something that had gotten tracked in on their carpet. So on a Thursday morning in late July, Harry found himself wedged in the back of the Dursleys' car between Dudley's elbow and the door handle, watching London blur past the window. Dudley was eating crisps and had already dropped 3 of them on Harry's leg. Harry didn't say anything. He'd learned early that saying anything usually made it worse. They parked near Charing Cross Road and Vernon handed Harry a slip of paper with the vault key taped to it, told him he had 2 hours, and made it very clear that if Harry did anything that embarrassed them, there would be consequences. Harry nodded. He was good at nodding. What Vernon hadn't accounted for was that Harry was 9 years old, had never navigated Diagon Alley alone, and had exactly no idea how to get into Gringotts and back out again without something going wrong. What Harry had, though, was the particular competence of a child who has been handling things alone since he was old enough to reach the stove. He figured it out. He always figured it out. He pushed through the leaky cauldron with his chin up and his too big jacket pulled around him, following a pair of older witches through the back and watching carefully when one of them tapped the bricks. 3 up, 2 across. He memorized it in a single look. The archway opened, and Diagon Alley swallowed him whole. It hit him the same way it always did in the moments when magic stopped being something that happened to him and started being something that simply was, a kind of pressure behind the sternum, warm and aching and too large for his chest. The alley was busy, midsummer and full of families getting school supplies, and Harry moved through them with the practiced invisibility of someone who had spent years learning to take up as little space as possible. He got to Gringotts. He had his vault number on the slip. The goblin barely looked at him, which suited Harry fine, and the cart ride down into the earth was the closest thing to fun he'd had in weeks. He took what he needed from the vault, not too much, not too little, already calculating what things cost, and made his way back up into the sunlight. He was heading toward the apothecary because he noticed last year that some of the ingredients there smelled like the stuff Mrs. Fig grew in her back garden, and he had a theory he wanted to test, when he turned a corner near Madame Malkin's and walked directly into someone. Not a collision. He pulled up short before that happened, his reflexes sharper than they had any right to be for a 9-year-old. But close enough that he was suddenly looking up at a woman who made the air around her feel like standing in a beam of sunlight that came from no particular direction. She was tall, silver-haired, and very French. She wore robes the color of cream that somehow made everything around her look slightly less vivid by comparison. Her eyes were a pale blue, and they were currently fixed on Harry with an expression of alert curiosity that he wasn't used to seeing directed at him. Behind her stood 2 girls. The older one was maybe 12 or 13. Harry's first impression was bright, the way you'd describe a flame, or a blade rather than a person. Silver blonde hair down her back, cheekbones you could cut glass on, and the particular posture of someone who had been told she was exceptional so many times that she'd simply decided to believe it and move on. She was looking at Harry the way she probably looked at most things, evaluating. The younger girl was his own age, maybe a little younger. She had the same silver blonde hair but wore it in a loose plait over one shoulder, and her expression was, open was the word. Like a window with nothing in front of it. She was holding a paper bag in both hands and looking at Harry with wide, serious eyes. Harry said, "Sorry." Out of habit, because he always apologized first even when it wasn't his fault. The older girl opened her mouth, probably to say something sharp, Harry could tell by the angle of her chin, but then something happened. He didn't see it coming. There was no warning, no build-up. One moment he was standing in the middle of Diagon Alley on a Thursday morning in July, and the next it was like the world had quietly and firmly rearranged itself around a new axis. Not painful. Not dramatic. Just certain. The way you're certain of your own name. The older girl had gone very still. Her chin came down from its challenging angle. She was staring at Harry with an expression he'd never seen on anyone's face before, and he couldn't name it, but something in his chest responded to it like a tuning fork struck at exactly the right frequency. The younger girl dropped her paper bag. It hit the cobblestones, and she didn't look at it. She was looking at Harry, and her expression was the same as her sister's, that same unnamed thing, but layered over with something so purely astonished that it was almost funny. "Man," the older girl said. Her voice had changed. The sharpness was gone from it. She sounded younger. "Man." The silver-haired woman turned to look at her daughters. Then she turned back to Harry. Then she looked at her daughters again. And something moved across her face. Recognition, Harry thought, the kind that went all the way down to the bone, and she crouched down very slowly until she was at eye level with him. "Hello?" she said. Her English was accented and precise. "What is your name, little one?" Harry blinked. People didn't usually ask him that. "Harry," he said. "Harry Potter." The woman closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them, she was completely composed, but Harry, who had spent 9 years learning to read adults for signs of what was coming, could see that she was doing the composure deliberately. Working at it. "My name is Apolline Delacour," she said. "These are my daughters." Fleur, the older girl, who gave a very small, slightly dazed nod, and Gabrielle. The younger one had crouched down to pick up her paper bag and was now standing up again, her eyes never having left Harry's face. "Bonjour," Gabrielle said very seriously. "Hi," Harry said. Gabrielle smiled. It was the kind of smile that made you feel like you'd done something right without knowing what it was. Apolline straightened up. She looked at Harry for a long moment, not the way adults usually looked at him, cataloging the scar or measuring the disappointment of a hero who turned out to be undersized, but with the careful attention of someone doing very precise mathematics in their head. "Are you here alone?" she asked. "Yes," Harry said. "No point lying about it. Where are your parents?" Harry considered the various ways to answer that. "My aunt and uncle dropped me off," he said. "They're waiting." Apolline's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. She had the particular stillness of a woman who had just come to a decision. "Would you like to walk with us?" she asked. "We are going to Flourish and Blots. And then perhaps for tea." Harry looked at her. He looked at Fleur, who had recovered most of her composure but was watching him with an expression of careful, deliberate attention. He looked at Gabrielle, who was still smiling. "Okay," he said. He didn't know, walking through Diagon Alley beside the Delacours that July morning, that he had just said yes to the thing that would change the shape of his entire life. He just knew that for the first time in as long as he could remember, he didn't feel invisible. Fleur Delacour was not accustomed to being thrown off balance. She had grown up knowing exactly what she was, part Veela, which meant part fire and part grace and part something older and stranger than both, and that knowledge had always been a kind of armor. People looked at her, people were affected by her, and she moved through that reality with the practiced calm of someone who has learned that the attention is about them, not about her. She didn't resent it. She simply understood it, and understanding it meant it couldn't touch her. Then this boy had turned a corner in Diagon Alley and the armor had simply stopped working. She walked beside him now, half a step behind because the pavement was narrow, and tried to think about it with the analytical mind she prided herself on. He was 9, same as Gabrielle. He was small for it, not stunted exactly, but spare, like someone had given him less than the standard amount of everything. His clothes didn't fit. His hair was an absolute disaster. He had a lightning bolt scar on his forehead that she'd heard of, obviously, Everyone in the magical world had heard of it, but she'd always filed Harry Potter under the category of things that were probably disappointing up close, the way famous places usually were. He wasn't disappointing. That was the problem. She couldn't have explained what she'd felt when their eyes met, except that it wasn't what Veela magic usually did. Veela magic was her magic going outward, affecting others. This was something going inward, recognizing something. Like a compass settling on north. The oldest stories, the ones her grandmother told in Occitan by the fire, the ones that made her mother's expression go soft and serious, spoke about it. About the rare and occasional phenomenon of a Veela finding not just a compatible person but a true mate. Someone their magic didn't affect but rather responded to. And in those rarest of stories, it didn't happen to just one Veela in a family. Fleur looked at Gabrielle. Gabrielle was walking on Harry's other side, chattering to him in a mix of French and English about something. Fleur caught les livres and beautiful pictures and Harry's voice saying something quiet that made Gabrielle laugh. Gabrielle's magic was newer, less settled than Fleur's, but Fleur could feel it right now the way you could feel weather before it arrived. That same compass-turning sensation. Both of them. At the same time. Fleur pressed her lips together and focused on walking in a straight line, which shouldn't have required this much effort. Ahead of them, her mother was talking to Harry in a voice Fleur recognized, the same one Apolline used when she was gathering information and not letting on that she was gathering information. Harry was answering in short, careful sentences, giving away very little. He was good at that, Fleur noticed. Most 9-year-olds talk too much or too little. He talked exactly as much as the question required and then stopped. Do you like reading? Gabrielle was asking him, with all the directness of a child who hadn't yet been taught to be indirect. Yeah, Harry said. Our school doesn't have great books but the library. He paused. The public library near where I live. I go there a lot. What do you like? Anything, really. History mostly. And stories about, I don't know. People figuring things out. Gabrielle nodded like this made complete sense. Fleur likes those too, she said. She pretends she only reads serious books, but she also reads adventure stories. I've seen them. Gabrielle, Fleur said. It is true, Gabrielle said, entirely unrepentant. Harry looked up at Fleur, and there it was again, that settling sensation, that click of recognition, with something that might have been the beginning of a smile at the corner of his mouth. What kind of adventure stories? He asked. Fleur lifted her chin. That, she said, is not your business. The ones with knights, Gabrielle said helpfully. And the ones about, Gabrielle. Dragons? Gabrielle finished, and smiled at Harry like a conspirator. Harry smiled back, and it was the first real smile Fleur had seen from him, and it changed his face completely. There was something there, behind the careful quietness, something bright and dry and quick, a sense of humor that was waiting for permission to come out. She was, she realized, completely paying attention to him. This was new. Flourish and Blots was loud and crowded and smelled like paper and possibility, and Harry moved through it with the particular reverence he reserved for books and places that felt safe. He picked things up carefully and put them back in the right places, which Apolline noticed because she noticed everything, and he didn't ask for anything until Gabrielle demanded he look at a book about magical creatures that had moving illustrations. This one, Gabrielle said, shoving it at him. Look at the hippogriff, look, he moves. Harry looked. The hippogriff in the illustration paced back and forth across the page, and then fixed the reader with an imperious golden eye. Harry tilted the book slightly and the hippogriff tilted its head in response. Harry tilted it the other way. The hippogriff mirrored him exactly. It's doing what I do, Harry said. It likes you, Gabrielle said, with complete confidence. Can animals and books like people? Magical ones can, she said like this was obvious. You just have to. She thought about it. You have to mean it when you look at them. Some people just look. You have to look. Harry studied her. How do you know the difference? Gabrielle considered this very seriously. I always know, she said simply. Harry glanced across the shop to where Fleur was examining something on a high shelf with the focused intensity of someone who was absolutely not watching him from the corner of her eye. He looked back at the hippogriff in the book. He looked at Gabrielle. "I believe you," he said. Gabrielle beamed. Apolline materialized beside Harry in the quiet way she had, which shouldn't have been possible for someone with that kind of presence. "Harry," she said, "which books were you planning to purchase today?" Harry told her. He had a list. He made it at the Dursleys' kitchen table at 6 in the morning when no one else was awake, cross-referencing what he remembered of last year's Hogwarts letter with the cost estimates he'd looked up in a library book about the wizarding world. He had exactly enough in his bag if he was careful. Apolline listened to the list. "That is very organized," she said. "I like to know what things cost," Harry said. Something in Apolline's face shifted the same way it had on the street, that precise internal recalculation. "Yes," she said. "That is a sensible habit." She paused. "Would you allow me to purchase the creature book for Gabrielle? She will not stop talking about it, and I have been pretending not to notice for 20 minutes. "I heard that," Gabrielle called from one aisle over. "Good," Apolline called back, without raising her voice. Harry looked at the book in his hands. "It wasn't on my list," he said carefully. "No. I meant as a gift. For Gabrielle." Apolline's eyes were steady on him. "She has good instincts about people. When she wants to share something with someone, it is usually because she is right about them." Harry processed this. He wasn't used to compliments that came sideways like that, wrapped in something else. He was used to being either invisible or scolded, and the middle ground, being seen, being acknowledged, was territory he didn't quite have a map for. "Okay," he said, because it seemed like the right answer. He handed the book carefully to Apolline. She took it. "Thank you," she said, and she meant more than the book, and somehow Harry understood that without knowing how. He was at a cafe down the alley that Harry had never noticed before, tucked between a broom shop and an establishment that appeared to sell nothing but enchanted weather vanes. The tables were small and the chairs were comfortable, and someone was playing a piano very softly somewhere inside. Harry had hot chocolate because Apolline suggested it with a confidence that made refusal seem beside the point, and it was the best thing he'd ever tasted. Not sweet exactly, just deep, with something underneath the chocolate he couldn't identify that made him feel warm from the inside out. He held the cup in both hands and listened to the Delacours talk. They switched between English and French fluidly, including him in the English portions without making it obvious they were including him, which he appreciated. He learned that Apolline had business at the British Ministry, something about international cooperation that she described in terms deliberately vague enough that he understood she was being careful around an unknown quantity. He learned that Fleur was starting her 3rd year at Beauxbatons in September, and that she was already the best in her year at Transfiguration, and was furious about being only 2nd best at Charms. He learned that Gabrielle would start Beauxbatons in 2 years and had very strong opinions about this. "I want to start now," she said. "Main tenant." He learned that Apolline watched him constantly, with the careful warmth of someone who had made a decision and was seeing it through. "What about you?" Fleur asked at one point. She'd been directing conversation at him in small, careful increments, like someone testing ice before stepping on it. "You start Hogwarts in 2 years?" "Yes," Harry said. "Have you read much about it?" "Everything I could find," Harry said. "The library books aren't very detailed, but there was one, Hogwarts, a history, that the local library had in their special collections, and I had to ask the librarian specially to access it, but she let me." He caught himself. He was talking more than usual. He stopped. Fleur was looking at him. Not evaluating this time, something closer to interested. "What was the most surprising thing?" she asked. "The staircases," Harry said. "That they move. I kept trying to figure out the logic of it, whether there's a pattern to where they go, and the book didn't have enough information to work it out. I want to map them." "Do you always want to understand the logic of things?" she asked. "Doesn't everyone?" "Nah," she said flatly, like it was a settled fact. Fleur always wants to understand the logic, Gabrielle said, but she also wants to know what she thinks about things. Not just what is true, but what she thinks. She argues with books sometimes. Books deserve to be argued with, Fleur said, not defensive. If you just accept what you read, you are not thinking, you are just storing. Harry looked at her. I do that, he said. Argue with books. In my head. Fleur looked back at him. That compass needle sensation, steady and sure. Out loud is better, she said. More honest. I don't always have someone to argue with. The words came out before he'd decided to say them, and he heard the shape of them a moment after, the plain fact of the loneliness in them, just sitting there on the table between the hot chocolate and the untouched plate of biscuits that Gabrielle was slowly working through. He didn't take it back. He didn't apologize. He just let it sit. Apolline reached across the table and put her hand over his, just briefly, just the press of a warm palm, and then withdrew it. You do now, Gabrielle said simply, and took another biscuit. The hour and 40 minutes became 2 hours and 15 minutes, and Harry registered this somewhere around the same time he registered that he didn't particularly care. The Dursleys would be irritated. The Dursleys were often irritated. He had never before had anything that felt worth being on the wrong end of that irritation for, and now he did, and he sat with that discovery quietly while Gabrielle told him about the village near their home in France and Fleur described Beauxbatons with the particular affection of someone who pretended not to be fond of things. It sounds good, he said, when she'd finished a description of the palace that was clearly underselling it on purpose. It is fine, she said. You love it, he said. She looked at him. I did not say that. You described the library for 4 minutes without stopping. A pause. The corner of her mouth moved. The library is exceptional, she allowed. The library is her favorite place in the world. Gabrielle informed him. She has a table that she considers hers. She has been in 3 arguments with older students about the table. 2 arguments, Fleur said. 3. The one in April counts. The one in April was a discussion. You won. That is not the definition of an argument. Harry watched them and felt something in him that had no good name, not happiness exactly, something quieter and more durable than happiness. Something that felt like the first note of a word he'd been trying to remember. Apolline caught his eye. She had the expression of a woman who understood everything currently happening to him without needing to be told, and who was not in the least surprised by any of it. We leave for France on Sunday, she said. We will be at the ministry tomorrow for meetings, but... She paused, measured, deliberate. Where are you staying this summer, Harry? With my aunt and uncle, he said. In Surrey. And do you enjoy Surrey? The honest answer was so obvious that saying it felt almost funny. No, he said. Apolline nodded slowly. Then she said, in exactly the tone of someone mentioning the weather, I would like to extend an invitation to you to spend the remainder of the summer with our family in France, if that is something your guardians would permit. Harry stared at her. Of course, she added. You are not obligated, yes, Harry said. He heard himself say it before he'd consciously decided. Yes, please. Apolline smiled. It was a warm and entirely unsurprised smile. Bien, she said. Then we will speak with your aunt and uncle. They won't. Harry started, and then stopped, because Apolline Delacour's expression had shifted to something that reminded him of the hippogriff in Gabrielle's book, that golden imperious eye, and he thought, with sudden certainty, that Vernon Dursley was going to be significantly less of an obstacle than he imagined. Gabrielle patted his hand. Maman gets what she wants, she said not unkindly. It is just how it is. She is a Veela, Fleur added, with a kind of resigned pragmatic pride. Evidement. What's a Veela? Harry asked. Both girls looked at him. Then they looked at each other. Then they looked at him again. Oh, Fleur said with the tone of someone who has just realized a conversation is going to be longer than expected. Well, Apolline went to speak with Vernon Dursley while Harry waited outside the leaky cauldron with Fleur and Gabrielle. She was inside for 11 minutes. Harry knew because he counted. When she came out, she looked perfectly composed, and Vernon came out behind her looking the way a man looks when he has just been categorically rearranged. Petunia was visible through the window of a tea shop across the road, and her expression suggested she had watched whatever happened with something between relief and deep suspicion. Apolline handed Harry a card with an address in France written on it in neat dark ink. "Your things," she said, "will need to be collected from your room. Would you like one of us to accompany you?" The question was asked with the same careful courtesy as all her other questions, but Harry heard what was underneath it. She had already decided she was not sending him back to Surrey alone. "I can manage," Harry said. "Of course you can," she said. "That was not what I asked." Harry looked at her. "I'd like that," he said. "If that's okay." "It is more than okay," Gabrielle said. "Allons why?" Fleur looked at her sister. "You cannot just say allons why every time you want to go somewhere." "It works every time," Gabrielle said, and started walking. It did work, as it turned out. They all followed. Number 4, Privet Drive, turned out to be exactly what Harry had always known it was in the abstract, a very neat, very ordinary house where the ordinary was maintained at some cost, and the cost was Harry. He knew this the same way he knew the staircases at Hogwarts had a logic he hadn't worked out yet, not bitterly, not self-pityingly, just factually, the way you know the weather. What was new was seeing it through other people's eyes. Fleur stood in the doorway of the cupboard under the stairs. Harry had gotten his things from there quickly, efficiently, not mentioning why there was a cot in a cupboard, and her expression was very still and very deliberate in a way that he was starting to recognize meant she felt something strongly and was deciding what to do with it. Gabrielle stood beside her and took her sister's hand. Harry shouldered his bag. He had everything that mattered, which wasn't much: his school letter, his vault key, a book he'd borrowed from the library and kept 3 months past due because he hadn't wanted to give it up, 3 changes of clothes that technically fit. He was done in 4 minutes. "Ready," he said. Apolline was downstairs saying something to Petunia in a tone that was too low to hear, which was probably deliberate. Harry could hear Petunia's responses, short, clipped, and the long silences that followed, and something about those silences told him that Apolline was very good at making silences say things. He didn't look back at the cupboard. Fleur fell into step beside him as they went down the stairs, and she didn't say anything, which was the right thing. He hadn't asked for anything to be said. She just walked next to him, close enough that he could feel the particular warmth that seemed to radiate off her that he didn't have a name for yet, but that felt, instinctively, like something he could navigate by. Gabrielle took his free hand on the other side, unself-consciously, the way only very young children and very confident people touch someone, with no performance in it, no negotiation, just the fact of the thing. Harry held it. They walked out the front door of number 4, Privet Drive into the afternoon sun, and Harry didn't look back. He didn't need to. The portkey was a slightly battered copy of Magical Mediterranean Waterways, which Apolline produced from her handbag with the calm efficiency of someone for whom intercontinental magical travel was simply a logistical matter. She activated it with a French word Harry didn't know, and they all grabbed hold, Harry between Fleur and Gabrielle, Apolline at one end, and the world pulled itself inside out and spat them back onto a hillside in France as the sun was going down, and the air smelled like lavender, and something that took Harry a moment to identify as the sea. He stood very still for a moment, getting his feet under him. The Delacour house was below them. House was not quite the word. It was large and old and built with the easy confidence of a building that expected to be here for another 300 years. It had a garden that spilled down the hillside and something that looked wild but wasn't quite, and through the trees Harry could see the edge of the Mediterranean going gold in the evening light. "Oh," he said. It was all he had. Gabrielle squeezed the hand she was still holding. "Home," she said simply. The evening light came through the trees and lay across the garden and the white walls of the house and across the 3 of them standing on the hillside, and Harry felt it, That ancient 300-year-old thing that had rearranged itself around a new axis in Diagon Alley, settle into something steady and sure. Not a pressure anymore. Not a question. Just a fact, the way north is a fact, reliable and absolute. A compass finding north. Fleur looked at him, then at her sister, then at him again, and her expression had shed all its evaluating and all its deliberate composure, and what was underneath was something bright and honest and a little afraid, in the way that only things that matter can make you afraid. Bienvenue, she said. Her voice was quiet. Welcome, Mary. Airy. The accent dropped the H. He didn't correct it. He wasn't sure he ever wanted it corrected. Thank you, he said. Below them, a light came on in the house. Apolline was already walking down the hill, and Gabrielle pulled Harry gently along, and Fleur fell into step beside him, and the lavender smell wrapped around all of them as the Mediterranean went from gold to rose to the deep particular blue of a French summer evening. Harry Potter walked toward the light. For the first time, it was waiting for him. Chapter 2. The Weight of Wings. The first morning Harry woke up in France, he didn't know where he was. This happened sometimes at the Dursleys too, that brief, blank second before the walls of the cupboard reassembled themselves into meaning, but this was different. Here the ceiling was high, and the light was wrong, coming in too warm and too golden through curtains the color of old honey, and the bed was so thoroughly comfortable that his body had forgotten it was supposed to hold tension while sleeping. He lay there for a moment, letting the room come back to him. Stone walls. A window that looked out over the hillside. A desk with a lamp that had a small awl carved into its base. A bookshelf that someone had stocked with what turned out to be, when he sat up and squinted, a careful selection, some muggle, some magical, nothing condescending. Someone had thought about what he might want to read. That detail landed quietly in his chest and stayed there. He dressed and found his way downstairs by following the smell of coffee and something baking, which led him through 3 rooms that were all full of the comfortable disorder of a house that was actually lived in, books open on tables, a pair of Gabrielle's shoes by the foot of a staircase, what appeared to be a half-finished letter in French on a side table with a quill that was still moving even with no hand on it, until he reached the kitchen. It was a big kitchen, and it was full of morning light, and Apolline was at the counter with a cup of coffee reading a newspaper that occasionally rearranged its own photographs. She looked up when Harry appeared. "Good morning," she said. "Did you sleep?" "Yes," Harry said, which was true in a way it almost never was. "Thank you." "For the room." "The books were Fleur's idea," Apolline said, which answered the question he hadn't asked. She gestured at the table, which had been set for 4, including, Harry noticed, a place that was clearly his, with orange juice already poured. "Sit. The bread will be ready in a few minutes. The girls are still sleeping, which will last another." She glanced at the window. 10 minutes. Gabrielle cannot sleep past 8 regardless of what time she went to bed. Harry sat. The orange juice was fresh. He thought about whether to say that and decided it would be strange. He drank it instead. "I would like to speak with you about something," Apolline said without preamble. She set down her newspaper and gave him her full attention, which was, Harry was discovering, a significant quantity of attention. "Not immediately. After breakfast. But I want you to know that the conversation is coming so that you can prepare for it." Harry looked at her. "What about? What happened yesterday?" she said. "In Diagon Alley." "I don't know what happened," Harry said. "Honest. I know. That is why we should speak." She picked up her newspaper again, the conversation clearly tabled, not closed. "The bread is almost ready." It was, and it was extraordinary. The kind of bread that made you understand bread had always been capable of this, and the bread you'd been eating before was simply failing to live up to its potential. Harry ate 2 pieces without speaking and felt Apolline's quiet satisfaction at that without looking up. 8 minutes later, Gabrielle appeared in the doorway in her pajamas with her hair loose and her eyes half open, and said, "Bonjour," to everyone including the kitchen in general, and sat next to Harry and stole a piece of his bread and seemed to feel this required no explanation. Harry cut her another piece. 12 minutes after that, Fleur appeared, fully dressed, hair perfect, carrying a book under one arm, and took the remaining chair at the table with the precise movements of someone who did not do mornings but refused to let mornings know that. "You slept," she said to Harry. It was an observation, not a question. He could tell by the way it landed. "Yes," he said. "Good." She poured her own coffee with the serious focus of someone performing a ritual. "Today you should see the coast path. It's 12 minutes from the house." She set it to her coffee cup. "If you want." "I want," Harry said. Gabrielle already had her shoes on by the time Harry had finished his juice. The coast path was, as promised, 12 minutes from the house, and it was also the most beautiful thing Harry had ever personally stood next to. The Mediterranean below the cliff was 3 different shades of blue going out from the shore, pale crystal close in, then a deeper turquoise, then the deep open blue that went all the way to the horizon, and the cliff itself was white stone and wildflowers, and the air had that particular quality of coast air that makes everything you breathe feel like something you've been missing. Harry stood at the edge and looked at it, and didn't say anything for a while. "The first time I came up here," Gabrielle said from beside him, "I cried." She said it like a plain fact, no embarrassment. "Because it was too much." "I understand that," Harry said. Fleur was standing a little further along the path with her book open, reading. She wasn't reading, though. Her eyes hadn't moved in 3 minutes, and Harry was beginning to get a sense for what Fleur's concentration looked like versus what Fleur's thinking looked like, and this was the second one. She was thinking and holding the book in front of her the way some people hold a cup of tea they've forgotten to drink. "She's trying to figure out how to talk to me," Harry said very quietly to Gabrielle. Gabrielle looked up at him. "Yes," she said, equally quiet, like this was old news. "She does not usually have to try. With people. She is very—" she searched for the word. "She is very sure of herself. But she does not know what to do with you yet. It bothers her. Should I make it easier for her?" Gabrielle considered this with genuine seriousness. "Nah," she said finally. "She is better when things are a little hard. Don't make it easier. Just be patient." 9 years old, Harry thought, and talking about her sister like a naturalist describing a creature she had catalogued over many years. He looked at Gabrielle with new respect. "You're very wise," he said. "I know," she said simply, and went to chase a butterfly over the edge of the path. Harry walked along the cliff toward Fleur. He didn't try to make it easy. He just stopped next to her and looked out at the sea and said nothing, and let the silence be comfortable, which it was, which surprised him, because most silences required him to be small inside them, and this one was just silence. Just 2 people standing next to each other on a cliff above the Mediterranean on a morning in August. "I know you have questions," Fleur said eventually. "About the Veela thing?" "Yes." "Your mother said she'd explain." "She will." Fleur's eyes moved from the horizon to him. "But I will explain it better." Harry very nearly smiled. "Okay," he said. Fleur closed her book, she'd given up the performance, and turned to face the sea properly, leaning her elbows on the stone railing at the cliff's edge. "You know some of it from what I said yesterday," she said. "Veela magic. The pull it creates in other people. Most people who encounter a Veela are affected. They feel drawn. It is not love, it is just the magic. Like how a bright light makes you look at it. It is not a choice. It doesn't work on me," Harry said. "Not a boast, just observation." "No." She was quiet for a moment. "It should. Even other magical people, even those who know what it is, still feel it somewhat. It is the nature of the magic. But you—" she pressed her lips together. "When we met yesterday, nothing in you reached toward me because of the Veela pull. And instead the other thing happened," Harry said. "We." The word was very quiet. "The other thing happened." "Which is?" She was quiet for long enough that Harry thought she might not answer. Then she said, "Have you ever had a compass? A real one, not a magical one?" "Yes," Harry said. "In the school's science cupboard. We used them in geography." "What does it do?" "Finds north." "It does not decide to find north," Fleur said. "It does not choose north because north is convenient or because it has thought about its options. It finds north because that is what it is built to do, because north is exactly what its nature responds to." She looked at him directly. "Veela magic, the old magic at its heart, has something like that. Not for everyone. Almost never for anyone. But sometimes." She stopped. Started again. "Sometimes a Veela meets someone and the magic does not reach outward. It settles inward. Recognizes. Like the compass." Harry stood with this. The sea went on being 3 shades of blue below them. "Recognizes what?" he asked. "A mate," she said very plainly, "the way you say a word you've practiced saying without flinching. Not in the way people think. Not the stories. Not compulsion or ownership or any of that. Just recognition. The magic saying, this person. Specifically this one." Harry thought about the moment in Diagon Alley. The click. The settling. He thought about the way it had felt, not overwhelming, not romantic in the way his extremely limited understanding of romance suggested, but like a fact. Like learning something true. "And Gabrielle felt it too," he said. "Yes. Is that normal?" "It has happened 3 times in recorded Veela history," Fleur said. 2 sisters sharing a mate. 3 times in. She made a gesture. A very long time. What happened to them? The other times? Fleur's expression shifted to something careful. The first time, the families disagreed. It did not go well. She moved on quickly. The second time was 400 years ago and the records are incomplete. The third time. She paused. The third time, the 3 of them changed the course of a war. Harry let that sit for a moment. "That's quite a thing to mention." "I wanted to be thorough," she said, and there was just enough of the dry, arch quality in it to make him realize she was being deliberately funny, and he laughed, and the laugh seemed to catch her off guard because she blinked. "Sorry," he said. "Don't apologize," she said. She looked at him with that open, honest expression that replaced the composed one when she forgot to maintain it. "You have a very good laugh." Harry had genuinely no idea what to do with this, so he looked back at the sea. "Your mother is going to explain the rest?" "Yes." Fleur straightened up. "She will be more organized about it than I was. She will explain the bond properly. The implications. What it means going forward." She paused. I should tell you that regardless of what the bond is, or what the magic says, I am not." She stopped. Chose her words. "You are 9. I am 13. The bond is not, it does not demand anything. Not now. Perhaps not for a long time. It is not like that." "I know," Harry said. She looked at him. "You know? It didn't feel like that. When it happened. It felt like." He thought about the compass metaphor he'd used, that seemed to belong to both of them now. Like something making sense. Not like a pull. Like understanding something. Fleur studied him for a long, measuring moment. "Yes," she said, and she sounded slightly undone. "Exactment. Exactly that." Gabrielle reappeared from wherever the butterfly had taken her, her plait half undone and her shoes dusty. She looked at the 2 of them looking at each other and smiled the smile of someone watching a complicated puzzle click into alignment. "Allons why," she said. "Maman wants us back for the conversation." "You knew she was going to call us," Harry said. "I always know," Gabrielle said. Apolline explained it the way she did everything, precisely, without condescension, and without softening the parts that needed to be said plainly. They sat in what she called the salon, which was a room full of afternoon light, and comfortable chairs and a fireplace that had a fire in it despite the summer warmth because the stone walls made the room cool. She sat across from Harry and the girls sat on either side of him, which might have been strategic, or might have simply been where they wanted to be. She told him about Veela history, the real history, not the sanitized version that British magical textbooks offered. She told him about the mate bond, which had been documented and studied and was not, as some people like to claim, a form of enchantment. The difference, she said, between Veela allure and the mate bond is the difference between someone being dazzled by a bright light and someone finding what they have been looking for. One is passive. The other is, she considered. The other is an active recognition by the deepest part of the magic. It cannot be faked or forced or broken without breaking the people involved. Can it be broken? Harry asked. Not by outside force, she said. Only by the people in the bond choosing to reject it, which requires sustained and deliberate. She paused. It would require all three of you to actively work against it. Which I do not think will happen. Not a prediction. A simple assessment. What does it actually do? Harry asked. Practically. Apolline's expression appreciated the question. Practically it grows. The bond now is thin. A thread. As you grow older and know each other better, it becomes stronger. It is not a mental link, you will not read each other's thoughts. But you will be aware of each other in ways that are difficult to describe and easy to feel. Protection instinct. Emotional resonance in extreme situations. And, she folded her hands. Your magic will recognize each other. Be compatible in ways that make working together significantly more powerful than working separately. All three of us, Harry said, looking at Gabrielle and then Fleur. All three, Apolline confirmed. And you're okay with this? Harry said. With me? You don't know me. Apolline looked at him for a moment that was long enough to feel considered. I know you better than you might expect, she said. And I know my daughters. And I know what this bond means. I have studied it my whole adult life because I knew it was possible for them, even if unlikely. What it means is that you three recognized each other at the level of your deepest magic. She paused. That is not something I would argue with, even if I wanted to. Which you don't, Harry said. Which I do not. She agreed. You are welcome in this house, Harry. Fully and without condition. Harry looked at his hands for a moment. The afternoon light came through the windows and lay across the stone floor in long rectangles. Outside, a bird called twice and stopped. There's more, though, he said. Isn't there? Things that are going to be complicated. Apolline's expression was carefully neutral, which was its own answer. Yes, she said. Because of who I am. Partly. And because of who you are. He added, looking at Fleur and Gabrielle, and what the bond means politically. Apolline studied him. You are 9 years old. She said, not dismissively, she said it like someone recalibrating an expectation. I know, Harry said. But I've been reading about the wizarding world since I found out about it last year, and the politics are pretty clear even from the outside. There are people who would have opinions about this. There are, Apolline said. Will they be a problem? That, said Apolline, is something I am already addressing. You do not need to concern yourself with it this summer. Harry looked at her. He thought about pressing it. He thought about the fact that he was 9 and she was, whatever Apolline was, which was clearly several steps ahead of most situations she was ever in, and he decided that pressing it would not get him better information and might get him less. He filed it. He would come back to it. Okay, he said. What about? He stopped. Looked at the girls. Is there anything I'm supposed to do? Or not do? For the bond. Is there anything that, just be yourself? Gabrielle said, with the finality of someone closing a book. Fleur made a sound that was almost a laugh. What she said? She allowed. That was unusually succinct. Harry told Gabrielle. I know what works, she said. What the rest of the summer was, in practice, was this: long mornings on the coast path and afternoons in the house's sprawling library, which made Harry feel the way he imagined drowning might feel if drowning were entirely voluntary and wonderful. It was 3 rooms and a mezzanine, and contained books in 4 languages, and Fleur took him through it on the 3rd day like someone showing him a territory she'd mapped herself, which she had. "These are the Veela histories," she said, gesturing at 2 full shelves near the window. "Most of it is in Old French or Occitan. I can translate." "I want to learn," Harry said. Fleur looked at him. "Occitan?" "French first. Then Occitan." She studied him. "That's—" She paused. "Why?" "Because if there are things I need to know about the bond, I'd rather read them myself than have them filtered through someone else's understanding." He met her eyes. "Even yours." Something in her expression shifted, not offended, the opposite. Impressed, if Fleur's impressed face was the slight softening of her usual sharpness, which Harry was starting to think it was. "Start with French," she said. "I will help you." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I will be a demanding teacher." "Good," Harry said. She blinked. He had done it again, responded in the way she didn't expect, the way that made her recalibrate. He could see it happening. He stored this information without knowing quite yet what he would do with it. Jean-Pierre Delacour came home from Paris on the 5th day, and Harry met him in the garden where he was trying to identify a bird in one of the creature books from the library. Jean-Pierre was a tall man who wore his authority the way Apolline wore hers, easily, without display, and he had Fleur's cheekbones and Gabrielle's eyes and the specific quality of someone who loved his family with a fierceness he was too dignified to advertise. He sat down next to Harry in the garden and looked at the book. "That's a kestrel," he said. "Muggle bird. Common on this coast." "Oh," Harry said. "I thought it was a merlin." Jean-Pierre looked again. He said. "The tail. You might be right." He extended a hand. "Jean-Pierre Delacour." "Harry Potter," Harry said, and shook it. Jean-Pierre nodded, like this confirmed something. "My wife has written to me about you," he said. "What did she say?" Jean-Pierre considered this with the careful diplomacy of a ministry official. "She said you were." He paused. "She said you were exactly what was needed." He said it like it meant something specific. "I don't know what that means," Harry said. "Neither do I, entirely," Jean-Pierre said. "With Apolline, meaning usually arrives before explanation." He looked out at the garden. "I understand you've agreed to learn French. And Occitan, eventually." Jean-Pierre raised an eyebrow. "Ambitious." "I'm thorough," Harry said. Jean-Pierre looked at him with something that would become, over years, the specific pride of a father watching someone become themselves without interference. At this moment it was just something warm and assessing. "Yes," he said. "I can see that." He stood up. "Come inside for dinner." Apolline has been cooking since 4, which means either she's pleased about something or she's worried about something, and the food will be exceptional either way. Harry followed him inside. It was exceptional. Dumbledore's letter arrived on the 7th day. It was addressed to Apolline, which said something about Dumbledore, that he knew who to address it to, which meant he knew where Harry was, which meant he had been paying attention in a way Harry filed away carefully. The letter was very polite and very precise, and Apolline read it at breakfast without her expression changing at all, which Harry had come to understand was a significant tell. "Who's it from?" Fleur asked. "Albus Dumbledore," Apolline said, setting it down. "What does he want?" "He wants to know that Harry is safe and well, and he wants to know my intentions, and he wants to know whether he should expect to be consulted before any." She paused, choosing the word. "Decisions are made." Harry looked at her. "What decisions?" "About your future. Your schooling. Your—" She folded the letter. "He is a man who is accustomed to having his hand in things. He has had his hand in yours for 9 years. He is noticing its absence. He's the one who left me with the Dursleys," Harry said. Apolline's expression went very quiet. Yes, she said. He is. Why? That, she said, is a question I have my own ideas about, and which I will share with you when you are older. For now, I will tell you that he had reasons he believed were good ones, and that good reasons and right decisions are not always the same thing. What are you going to write back? Apolline picked up her quill. I am going to tell him that you are healthy, happy, and well cared for, and that I look forward to a conversation about your future when the summer is over, and that in the meantime I expect your presence at Hogwarts in 2 years will be unchanged. She paused. And I am going to mention quite calmly that the bond has been recognized and documented, and that this has implications I am confident he will understand. Is that a threat? Harry asked. Apolline smiled, just the edge of it. It is information, she said. What he does with it is his business. Jean-Pierre, who had been reading his own newspaper, turned a page. Diplomatic, he said without looking up. Always, said Apolline. Harry watched her write. The quill moved in fast, sure strokes, the hand of someone who wrote letters as a weapon and knew exactly how they worked. He thought about Dumbledore, whom he'd never met, who had placed him in a cupboard under a staircase for 9 years for reasons he believed were good ones. He didn't feel angry about it. He catalogued it. He was 9 years old, and he was sitting in a house in France eating bread that was extraordinary and learning French from Fleur Delacour, who was currently stealing his butter without acknowledging she was doing it. The sun came through the kitchen windows and lit the whole table gold. He had time, Harry thought. He had 2 years before Hogwarts, and this summer, and whatever came after. He had the bond and its strange, steady certainty. He had the library. He had Gabrielle's unsettling wisdom and Fleur's demanding teaching and Apolline's letters that were really weapons and Jean-Pierre's quiet approval. He had enough. Whatever was coming, Dumbledore's plans, the political machinery Apolline had mentioned, the complications of being Harry Potter who was also the person the Delacour bond had found, he had enough to face it. He didn't know that yet with certainty, but he felt it, the way the compass felt north. Fleur looked up from her own letter. She was writing to a school friend at Beauxbatons, and caught him looking at her with some expression she apparently couldn't read, because she frowned slightly. What? She said. Nothing, Harry said. Thank you for the Occitan. The first session. I said don't thank me. I told you I was demanding. You are. I'm making progress faster than I expected. She looked at him with that assessing expression that was slowly becoming something else, something warmer underneath the sharp surface. Yes, she said. You are. She went back to her letter. Gabrielle looked up from her drawings. She was illustrating a story she was making up in her head and had been for 3 days, and gave Harry a look that said she saw exactly what was happening at this table and found it satisfying. Harry looked back at her with a look that said don't say anything. Gabrielle smiled and drew a compass on the corner of her page. The summer moved in the way that good summers do, not quickly, because the days were full, but smoothly, with the particular texture of time that is passing well. Harry's French improved faster than Fleur expected, and she told him so, grudgingly, one afternoon when he corrected a grammatical error in something she'd said in French, and she had to admit he was right. He started on the Veela histories, the French ones first, with Fleur sitting across from him in the library working through her own reading, available for questions and not pretending otherwise. He learned things in those books that made sense of things he hadn't known needed making sense. The bond was documented more thoroughly than Fleur had had time to explain on the cliff. There were diaries, observations, academic analyses from Veela scholars across centuries. He read them with the focused hunger he brought to anything that felt like it mattered, and he cross-referenced and took notes in a notebook Gabrielle had given him that had a sun embossed on the cover. He learned that the bond, as it grew, created what the oldest texts called les fils d'âme, soul threads. Not visible, not tangible, but real in the way that temperature and gravity are real, present and constant, and only notable when they were absent. He learned that the 3 times before in recorded history 2 sisters 1 mate configuration was called in Old Occitan the trèfle vrai, the true Clover, and that in all 3 documented cases, the person recognized by both sisters had been someone of exceptional magical power whose potential had not yet been understood by the people around them. He sat with that for a long time. Gabrielle found him sitting with it, and sat next to him and did her drawings without speaking, which was what he needed, and after a while he said, "Did you know? Before it happened. That it might." "Nah," she said. "Not the how. Just," she colored in something on her page. "I always knew there was someone to find. Man told us both, when we were very small. About the bond. About the possibility. I thought it would be something." She considered. "Something big. A big moment. But it was just a corner, and there you were." "Just a corner," Harry said. "The most important things are always like that," Gabrielle said. "They don't announce themselves." Harry thought about a Thursday morning in Diagon Alley when he'd been trying to find the apothecary to test a theory about plants. "No," he agreed. "They don't." On the last day of August, they went back to the coast path, all 3 of them, in the late afternoon when the light was starting to go sideways and warm. School was coming, Fleur back to Beau's Batons in 4 days, Harry back to Surrey, and then, in 1 more year, Hogwarts. And no one was saying it yet, but everyone felt it, the end of something that didn't have a name. They sat on the rocks above the sea, Harry in the middle as had become natural without being decided, and watched the boats on the horizon and said things that mattered and things that didn't and let them be equal. "You're right," Gabrielle said. "Not a question." "Every week," Harry said. "More if anything interesting happens." "Everything interesting will happen," she said with confidence. Fleur was looking at the sea. She had her hair down, which Harry had noticed she rarely did in public. The wind was pulling it across her face, and she wasn't fixing it. "Hogwarts," she said. "Yeah. I have opinions about Hogwarts." "I know. You've shared them. I have more." "Of course you do," he said. She glanced at him sideways, hair across her face, and the low sun lit the whole scene gold, and she said, "Be careful with Dumbledore. He is not an enemy, but he has plans. He thinks in long arcs. You are part of one of his long arcs, and he will not tell you which part." "I know," Harry said. "You cannot know yet, not fully. But keep it in mind." She paused. "Write to my mother if anything feels wrong. She will act on it." "Okay. And write to me," she added, as if it was an afterthought. It was not. "Every week," Harry said. "More if anything interesting happens." Fleur looked back at the sea. "Everything interesting will happen," she said, echoing Gabrielle without seeming to notice she was doing it, and Gabrielle caught Harry's eye and her expression was sunny and smug. He looked at them both, the older sister with the sea wind in her hair, and the younger one drawing something with her finger in the dust on the rock, and felt the bond, thin and new as it was, like a thread stretched across a very large distance but not close to breaking. Never close to breaking. The oldest books had been very clear on that. He had 1 year left before Hogwarts. 1 year of French lessons and coast path mornings and letters in the library, and the growing understanding of what he was and what the bond was and what was coming. 1 year to become the person who was going to walk into that castle and not be surprised by anything. He had, he thought, enough time. He started planning. Chapter 3. The first letters of war. The Hogwarts Express smelled like coal smoke and pumpkin pasties and the specific anxiety of several hundred children trying to pretend they weren't anxious, and Harry walked through it with his trunk floating behind him. He'd been practicing wandless levitation all summer and had gotten reliable enough at it that he stopped thinking about it as a trick and started thinking about it as just how he moved things, until he found an empty compartment near the middle of the train and settled in. He had a book open before the train started moving. Occitan grammar, because Fleur had sent him a list of texts she wanted him to work through before Christmas, and he was already 3 weeks behind her schedule, which she had communicated via letter in terms that were diplomatic on the surface and pointed underneath, which was simply how Fleur communicated and which he had come to find straightforwardly enjoyable. The compartment door opened 20 minutes into the journey and two redheads fell through it arguing about something that appeared to be Quidditch-related. They pulled up short when they saw Harry. "Sorry," said the taller one. "Thought this was empty." "It's fine," Harry said. The shorter one was staring at the floating book. Harry had forgotten about the floating book. He set it down on the seat beside him with a small gesture that he made unconsciously, and watched the shorter one's eyes go very wide. "You did that without a wand?" the shorter one said. "Yes," Harry said. "How?" "Practice." He looked at them. They were clearly brothers, same general architecture of face, same eyes, though the taller one had an ease about him that the shorter one didn't quite have yet, like the shorter one was still growing into himself. "Do you want to sit?" They did. They introduced themselves as Fred and George Weasley, which turned out to be one name split across two bodies. They finished each other's sentences not in the cute way people said that about twins, but in the genuinely functional way of two people who had developed their own shorthand and used it efficiently. Harry liked them immediately in the same way he liked useful things, directly, without complication. "Harry Potter?" he said when they asked. They both looked at his forehead. He was used to this. He waited. "Right," said Fred, or George, calmly. "So, wandless levitation. Does it work on other things?" said the other one. "Or just books?" "Other things," Harry said. "How heavy?" "I haven't hit a limit yet." The twins exchanged a look that contained an entire conversation. Then they both looked at Harry with the specific expression of people who have found something interesting and intend to see how far it goes. "We," said one of them, "are going to be friends." "Probably," Harry agreed. They were in the compartment for the rest of the journey, and they brought a red-haired boy with them at some point, younger, nervous, with a rat asleep in his jacket pocket and a smear of something on his nose that Fred pointed out and George ignored. Ron Weasley was less assured than his brothers and more earnest than he wanted anyone to know, and he looked at Harry with the specific expression of someone who had heard a famous name so many times it had become abstract, and was now discovering it was a real person. "You're actually him," Ron said. "Generally, yes," Harry said. "Brilliant," said Ron, with honest admiration that had nothing performance in it, which Harry appreciated. "A girl came in at one point looking for a toad, Neville Longbottom's toad," she said, "who had gotten loose near the luggage car. She had a lot of hair and a brisk manner, and she clocked Harry's Occitan grammar book in the time it took her to scan the compartment for a toad." "Is that Occitan?" she said. "Yes," Harry said. "Are you self-teaching?" "No, I have a tutor. I'm supplementing." She looked at him with the expression of someone who had just revised their opinion of a person upward by several notches. "Hermione Granger," she said. "Harry Potter." "I know," she said, without the reverence of Ron or the calculation of some people he met. "Just information. You're good at wandless magic. I've been reading about it. The theory suggests it requires a much more sophisticated grasp of intent than wand magic. Is that accurate from a practical standpoint?" Harry looked at her. "Sit down," he said. "We can talk about it." She sat. The conversation went on for 40 minutes and ranged across wandless theory and Occitan etymology, and the Fidelius charm and a debate about whether the core of a wand was more important than the wood, during which Harry and Hermione disagreed politely, and Ron ate all the remaining pumpkin pasties and Fred and George watched with the satisfied expressions of people at a sporting event. The toad was never found. Neville found them at Hogsmeade Station, slightly tearful, and it turned out the toad had been in his other pocket the whole time. The castle was exactly what the books had described and also nothing like them, in the way that all things worth knowing exceed their descriptions. Harry stood in the entrance hall with the rest of the first years and looked up at it, and felt the magic of the place, old, layered, complex, like a very long piece of music, press against his own and find it compatible. Like a handshake. Like a key fitting a lock it wasn't made for but worked in anyway. The sorting was in a hat, which he hadn't found in Hogwarts, a history, and which seemed to make students more anxious than it warranted. He watched the hat talk to the students before him and read their faces and understood approximately what was happening. A magical assessment, fairly sophisticated, and when his name was called he walked up to the stool and sat down and let the hat settle over his eyes. "Well," said the hat. Its voice was dusty and amused and very old. "Hello?" "Hello," Harry thought at it. My, said the hat. "You're different from what I expected." "What did you expect?" "The usual. Hero types tend to have a particular texture. Lots of courage on the surface, secondary qualities buried underneath. But you," a pause, like the hat was genuinely surprised. "You've been doing your homework." "I like to be prepared." "Prepared," the hat said, like it was tasting the word. "Ravenclaw would suit your mind. Gryffindor would suit your courage. Slytherin would suit your ambition, though you don't wear it the way they usually do. And Hufflepuff," another pause. "You understand loyalty in a way that's unusual for someone your age. What it costs. What it's worth. Where do you put someone who fits all of them?" Harry thought. "Traditionally, I pick the dominant quality. But with you," the hat sounded genuinely pleased, the way a craftsman sounds when shown an unusual piece of work. "I'll ask you directly. Where would you like to go?" Harry considered it. He thought about the bond and what it meant. He thought about the long arc Fleur had described, Dumbledore's plans, the political machinery that was already moving. He thought about what he needed versus what he was expected to do. "Where will I learn the most?" he thought. "Where will I have the best access to everything the castle can teach me?" "That," said the hat, with delight, "is a Ravenclaw question phrased with Slytherin reasoning and Gryffindor directness. You know, you're rather extraordinary." The hat, Harry thought back, seems to enjoy flattery. The hat replied, enjoys people who talk back. And then, out loud, to the hall. "Gryffindor!" Harry handed the hat back to Professor McGonagall, who was looking at him with an expression of measured assessment that he recognized by now. It was the look adults gave him when they'd expected something and gotten something different, and hadn't yet decided what to do with the difference. He nodded at her and went to the Gryffindor table. Ron waved at him from 3 seats down. Fred and George applauded loudly. Hermione, who had been sorted 4 names before him into Gryffindor, was already sitting with a book open in her lap and looked up to give him a nod that managed to be both welcoming and distracted simultaneously, which was exactly her. He sat down, and the feast appeared, and Hogwarts began. He wrote to Fleur that night. The letter was 2 pages, the sorting, the castle, the magic of the place pressing against his and finding it compatible, the twins, Hermione's theory about wandless casting, Ron's complete inability to pretend he wasn't curious about everything. He wrote to Gabrielle as well, a shorter letter, because Gabrielle's letters tended toward drawings and observations rather than essays, and that shaped the correspondence naturally. He wrote to Apolline last, briefer and more specific. "Hogwarts is exactly what the books suggested, and you were right about the atmosphere. I'll write when something important happens. Thank you for the summer. Thank you for everything." He sent the letters with the school owls and went to sleep and dreamed nothing in particular. Fleur's reply came 4 days later, which was faster than the owl route warranted, and was 4 pages, written in the sharp, precise hand she used when she was focused, and it covered his observations point by point in the way of someone who had been waiting for exactly this kind of letter, and was pleased to have it. She had opinions about Ravenclaw versus Gryffindor that she did not withhold. She had opinions about Wandless theory that substantially agreed with Hermione's and which Harry forwarded to Hermione, who sent back a list of follow-up questions that Harry forwarded back to Fleur, and this triangular correspondence became one of the quieter and more productive academic collaborations of Harry's first year, conducted entirely through owl post. Gabrielle sent a drawing of a Hogwarts castle with a tiny Harry on the battlements looking heroic, and in the corner, a small compass pointing at a star. He pinned it inside his trunk. Lucius Malfoy arrived at Hogwarts on a Tuesday in October, which was unusual because parents didn't come to Hogwarts in October, and which was unprecedented in the specific sense that he arrived not as a parent but as a representative of the Board of Governors, for reasons that were not fully explained in the official letter sent to McGonagall but which Harry Reading between the lines of what the older students discussed at dinner, gathered had something to do with a formal complaint about curriculum. Harry knew who Lucius Malfoy was. Apolline had written about him, carefully, specifically, the way she wrote about things that required attention. He's intelligent, she'd written. More patient than he appears. His public face is about blood purity and tradition because that is useful to him, but his actual interest is in power structures and who controls them. He has been paying attention to you for longer than you know. Draco Malfoy was in Slytherin and had made exactly one attempt to establish dominance over Harry in the first week, on the moving staircases, which Harry had declined to engage with in a way that was so calm and complete that Draco had apparently decided to recalibrate before trying again. They existed in a state of cold mutual acknowledgement that Harry found perfectly manageable, and that Draco found, he suspected, unsettling. Lucius arrived with the smooth confidence of someone who owned the air in whatever room he was in, which Harry noticed immediately from across the entrance hall. He also noticed that Lucius's eyes found him across the hall with the speed of someone who had been looking for him specifically. Harry met his gaze and held it, and didn't look away, which was the right move and also simply what he did, because he wasn't in the habit of looking away from things. Something shifted in Lucius's expression, brief and controlled but real. Reassessment. Harry filed it. They didn't interact directly. Lucius spent the day in meetings with Dumbledore and McGonagall, and Harry went to classes and learned a water-making spell and charms that he mastered on the third attempt but performed on the first because he found that effort was visible in a way that made people overestimate what they were seeing, and he wasn't sure yet if he wanted them doing that. He went to the library and worked on his Occitan and then went to dinner and sat between Hermione and Fred and listened to a theory Fred had about bewitched chalk. It was after dinner, heading back toward Gryffindor Tower, that he passed Lucius Malfoy in the corridor near the library. It was not an accident. Harry knew that before Lucius spoke, because nothing about Lucius Malfoy was accidental. "Mr. Potter," Lucius said. His voice was like his presence, carrying and controlled and designed to make you feel like a secondary consideration in a conversation about you. "I wanted to meet you formally." "Hello," Harry said. He stopped because not stopping would be rude, and Harry believed in choosing when to be rude rather than defaulting to it. "You look very much like your father," Lucius said. "I've heard that. He was." A pause. "A talented young man. Reckless, but talented." He said it with the air of someone who believes recklessness is a character flaw rather than a feature, which Harry noted. "Thank you for the compliment," Harry said. "The talent part." Lucius looked at him. The smooth confidence had a slight adjustment to it, a narrowing of calculation. "I understand you spent the summer in France," he said. "Yes," Harry said. "With the Delacour family." "Yes. Apolline Delacour is a remarkable woman," Lucius said. "Very capable. Very strategic." "She is," Harry agreed. He thought, "You've been in contact with her or about her. You know about the bond or suspect it. You're here partly about me and partly about what the bond means for your long arc." He didn't say any of this. "If you ever feel that you need guidance," Lucius said, with the specific warmth of a man who has practiced warmth until it is indistinguishable from the real thing to most audiences. "Navigating the wizarding world can be complex for those who come to it late. I would be happy to offer. I have guidance," Harry said pleasantly. "Thank you, though." Lucius looked at him for a moment that was just long enough to be intentional. Then he smiled, the right shape of a smile, the exact number of teeth, the precise eye movement. "Of course," he said. "Good evening, Mr. Potter." "Good evening," Harry said. He walked to Gryffindor Tower at his normal pace and wrote Apolline a letter that was 3 sentences long. "Lucius Malfoy came to Hogwarts today. He found me specifically in the corridor near the library. He offered guidance. I declined. What do you want me to know?" He sent it that night and had a reply by dawn, which meant she'd been awake when the owl arrived, which meant she'd been expecting it, which told him something. Her reply was 2 pages, and it was the most direct she had ever been with him. Apolline's letter explained the political landscape in the way a general explains a map to someone who is about to walk into it. The bond between Harry and her daughters was not secret, it couldn't be, because Veela magic didn't do secrets well, and the documentation she'd filed with both the French and British ministries meant that people in positions to care about such things already knew. What it meant politically was something she had been managing carefully, but Lucius Malfoy's presence at Hogwarts the day after term began suggested he was moving faster than she'd expected. The bone of it was this: a confirmed Veela-mate bond between a Delacour and Harry Potter created an alliance between the most politically significant Veela family in France and the most politically significant magical person in Britain. To someone who traded in power structures, this was a threat to existing arrangements that Lucius had spent 15 years building, carefully and patiently, and which depended on certain balances of influence remaining stable. He was not going to attack that arrangement directly. He was going to erode it, through legislation, through social pressure, through the gradual delegitimization of Veela human bonds and British magical law, through the slow repositioning of Harry as someone managed rather than autonomous. He was patient. He was intelligent. He was already 3 moves into a game he'd started before Harry arrived at Hogwarts. At the bottom of the letter, in Apolline's precise hand, "I am handling the ministry side. Jean-Pierre is managing the French political response. You do not need to fight this war right now. What you need to do is learn everything the castle can teach you, build the relationships that will matter, and be so clearly and unambiguously yourself that his framing cannot stick. The best defense against someone who wants to define you is to be already fully defined." Harry read it twice. He wrote back 3 words: "I understand." "Thank you." He put her letter in the secure compartment of his trunk that he charmed himself, a simple but effective layering of a disillusionment and a confundus that he'd worked out in September, and went to Transfiguration. The friendship with Ron was easy in the way that good friendships are easy, not effortless, because nothing worth having was, but natural. Ron was funny and loyal and remarkably unintimidated by Harry's abilities, which was refreshing in the specific way of a cool glass of water you didn't know you needed. He had 6 brothers and no illusions about hierarchy, which meant he had no particular impulse to make Harry into something elevated and separate. He just treated him like a person, which turned out to be the one thing Harry needed most and got least from everyone else. The friendship with Hermione was more like a collaboration that had become personal. She was precise and occasionally exhausting and right about things with a frequency that Harry found admirable rather than irritating, possibly because he was precise and occasionally exhausting himself, and recognized the type. They argued about the theory underlying spell work constantly and productively, and she sharpened things in him that needed sharpening, and he gave her the space to be uncertain that she didn't always give herself. The friendship with Fred and George was a conspiracy that wore the costume of a friendship, and Harry enjoyed it completely. Neville Longbottom was a different thing, quieter and more gradual. Neville was still growing into his own courage, carrying something heavy that Harry didn't push him on but recognized, and in the meantime they found a shared interest in the castle itself, its magic, its secrets, its moving architecture that Harry had wanted to map since he first read about it. They started mapping it together, Neville with his talent for remembering patterns and Harry with his ability to feel the magic shifting, and by Christmas they had 3 floors charted in a system that was part their own invented notation and part something that had emerged from the work itself. Classes were straightforward. Harry performed well without performing at all, which was not calculated but was simply the result of having spent a summer in one of the best private libraries in France with an excellent teacher, and unlimited time to learn things he wanted to know. He was not the best in every class. Hermione was better than him at charms precision, a Slytherin named Greengrass was better at potions, but he was the most rounded, and more importantly he was the most adaptable, because he hadn't just learned spells, he'd learned the logic underneath them, and the logic transferred. Professor McGonagall watched him with her measuring expression all term. Flitwick watched him with undisguised delight. Snape was a different and more complicated situation. Snape had disliked him on sight, which Harry noted and didn't take personally. He talked to Ron about it, and Ron had explained the James Potter history with the particular weariness of someone reciting something that had been explained to him several times by multiple brothers. Harry had thought about this and decided that inheriting someone else's grievances was not something he was going to do, and he also decided not to perform conflict with Snape when all the performance would accomplish was making both of them worse at a situation that wasn't going to resolve itself through conflict anyway. So he was precise and respectful in Snape's class and improved steadily, and gave Snape no purchase for the specific brand of contempt that Snape seemed to have ready for him. It did not make Snape like him, but it made Snape's dislike into something Harry could work around, which was more useful. Dumbledore he did not encounter directly for the first 2 months. The headmaster was a presence in the school the way the magic of the castle was a presence, pervasive, layered, not quite visible. Harry saw him at meals, at the start of term feast, at a distance crossing the grounds. He got the impression that Dumbledore was also watching and also waiting, and that unlike Lucius, whose watching was about strategy, Dumbledore's watching was about something more complicated. Guilt, possibly. Assessment, definitely. Harry couldn't quite read it yet and filed it for later. The direct encounter, when it came, was the last week of November, when a note appeared on his bedside table asking him to come to the headmaster's office after dinner. Dumbledore's office was remarkable, cluttered and alive in the way that spaces become when someone brilliant and eccentric inhabits them long enough to leave a mark on the air. The portraits of previous headmasters slept or pretended to sleep. Fawkes the Phoenix regarded Harry from his perch with liquid golden eyes and then made a low sound that was like the opening note of something much larger. Harry sat down in the chair opposite Dumbledore's desk. He put his hands in his lap and waited. Dumbledore looked at him over his half-moon spectacles. The expression was warm and grandfatherly and also, Harry thought, one that had been composed with great care. "Harry," he said. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," Harry said. "You have settled in well," Dumbledore said. "Your teachers speak highly of you." "I like learning," Harry said. "Yes. I understand you had a productive summer in France." He said it pleasantly, with no particular emphasis, which was the same as putting all the emphasis on it. "Very," Harry said. "The Delacour family is an old and distinguished one," Dumbledore said. "Apolline Delacour in particular is a woman of considerable—" He paused, the pause doing work. "Influence. She's been very kind to me," Harry said. He kept his voice level and mild. He was not going to perform anything in this room. Dumbledore studied him. Harry could feel it, a level of attention that was extraordinary. The quality of a mind that had spent decades reading people and situations, and he was now being read by it. He let it happen. He had nothing to hide and even less to perform. "Harry," Dumbledore said, after a moment, with a gentleness that was real rather than constructed, "I want you to know that everything I have done, every decision concerning you, has been made with your safety as the primary concern." "I know," Harry said. Dumbledore blinked. He'd expected something else. "You do? You have good reasons," Harry said. "For the Dursleys. The blood protection. I read about it. The Fidelius wasn't viable long-term after my mother died, and the next most powerful blood magic available required a living relative. Petunia was the only option." He paused. "I understand the logic." Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. "And do you?" He stopped. "I don't think logic and the right decision are always the same thing," Harry said, which was Apolline's sentence, and he knew it and used it deliberately. "But I understand that you were working with what you had and what you knew, and I'm not angry about it." Dumbledore looked at him with something that Harry couldn't quite categorize, not surprise exactly, because Dumbledore had clearly expected Harry to have been shaped by the Dursleys into something more malleable, and was now recalibrating at speed. "You are remarkably composed," he said. "I've had a good summer," Harry said. Another pause. Then Dumbledore said carefully, "I understand there is a bond. Of the Veela kind." "Yes." "And that Apolline Delacour has documented it officially." "Yes." "Harry," He leaned forward slightly. The warmth in his expression was genuine now, Harry thought. The performance had dropped half an inch, and what was underneath was real, the actual concern of a man who had spent too many years moving pieces across a board and had just noticed one of the pieces was watching him do it. There are things in your future that are significant, that require preparation of a particular kind. I know, Harry said. The bond, as meaningful as it is, won't interfere, Harry said. It strengthens rather than limits. The documentation on it is thorough. Apolline has the primary texts if you'd like to review them. The Trefovre configuration specifically has historical precedent for significant outcomes. He said the last words the same way Fleur had said 3 times in recorded history on the clifftop, without drama, just information. Dumbledore was still for a full 3 seconds, which Harry suspected was unusual for him. You have done your research, he said. I like to be prepared, Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him for a moment that stretched, and in it Harry saw something shift, the older man's understanding of the situation, recalibrating in real time. He had expected to have this conversation with a child who was confused and searching for guidance, and could be gently pointed in the direction that suited the longer arc. He was having it instead with a child who had spent the summer reading Veela history in Occitan, and understood the political implications of his own life. Well, Dumbledore said, after the stretch of silence, and for once there was no particular wisdom in the word. He just sounded slightly startled, and entirely genuine. Well, I'm not against you, Harry said, because it needed saying and he'd rather say it directly. I understand what you're trying to do. I'm just going to do it differently than you planned. Dumbledore looked at him. Then, slowly, a smile, a real one, not the composed version. Yes, he said. I rather think you are. Fleur's Christmas letter arrived by a large French owl that landed in the middle of the Gryffindor common room on the last day of term, and caused Ron to spill his hot chocolate. It was 6 pages, which was new. She'd been writing 4 pages since October, and the jump to 6 happened, Harry noticed, after the letter in which he described the Dumbledore conversation. She had opinions. Specific ones, delivered with the sharpness she used when she'd been thinking about something for long enough that the thoughts had gotten impatient. You said exactly the right things, she wrote, and I would have done it differently and probably less well, which I am telling you because you should know it, and not because I enjoy admitting things like this, which I do not. Harry read this in front of the fire with Ron asleep in the armchair beside him and Fred and George playing Exploding Snap in the corner, and felt the bond, stronger now than it had been in July, with more weight and substance, like a thread become a cord, pulled gently with something warm at the other end. He wrote back 8 pages. It was the most he'd ever written to anyone. He wrote about Dumbledore and Lucius and the castle and the mapping project with Neville and the triangular correspondence with Hermione and a dozen other things besides, and at the end he wrote, I'm going back to Apolline for Christmas. I know you'll be at Beauxbatons, but I wanted you to know. Her reply to that last bit came separately, in a second letter the same owl brought back 4 days later. I'll be at the house for the last week of December. My mother told me after I told her to ask. She was very smug about it. Harry had not known Fleur was capable of ending a letter with something that was essentially a joke at her own expense. He read it 3 times. He went to France for Christmas, and the week with Fleur was different from the summer, shorter and more aware of itself, the way the last hour of something good is always aware that it is the last hour. They argued about transfiguration theory for 2 days straight, and neither of them was entirely right, and both of them knew it. And on the second night Gabrielle got tired of the argument, and said, You are both right about different things and wrong about the same thing, and neither of you will say so because you like arguing. And left the room, and Harry and Fleur looked at each other across the table. She's right, Fleur said. She usually is, Harry said. It is deeply irritating, Fleur said. Yes, Harry said. They went back to arguing about transfiguration, but differently. The good kind of differently, where the argument was building something rather than just pushing. It was, Harry thought, the best Christmas he'd ever had by a margin so large it wasn't worth calculating. He went back to Hogwarts in January with 6 new books from the Delacour library, and the particular feeling of someone who has been reminded what they are working toward. The war Lucius was conducting showed its next move in February, when a proposal was quietly filed with the British Ministry's Department of Magical Cooperation, suggesting that the documentation requirements for Veela human bond registration be amended to include a mandatory review period of 3 years before the bond could be officially recognized, during which time it would have no legal standing. The proposal was buried in legislative language and announced as a procedural update to international magical relations treaties. Apolline's letter about it arrived the same day as the Daily Prophet article, which told Harry that she had sources in the ministry that were faster than the press. She was not alarmed. The letter was measured and precise and contained a list of the 12 people who would vote on the proposal, and their known positions, and the 3 pressure points she had already identified and was working. At the bottom, this is his opening move. It is designed to seem minor. Do not let anyone tell you it is minor. But do not react to it publicly. Let me work. Harry wrote back, understood. What do you need from me? Apolline's reply was a single line, be excellent. Harry read it and felt something in him settle like the compass needle, steady and absolute. He folded the letter and put it in his trunk and went to Charms and was excellent, and then went to the library and was excellent there too, and in the evening sat with Hermione and was excellent at arguing about the nature of magical intent until nearly midnight. Lucius Malfoy wanted to define Harry as something manageable, something procedural, something that could be papered over and delayed and eventually made to go away. Harry Potter, sitting in the Hogwarts library at 11:30 on a February evening with an Occitan dictionary on one side and Hermione's notes on the other, had absolutely no interest in going away. He was 10 years old and growing into himself like a tree growing into good soil, and the roots were deeper than anyone who had not been paying close attention would expect. He thought about Fleur on the cliff saying, "Be already fully defined." He thought about Gabrielle's drawing in his trunk, the tiny Harry on the battlements, and the compass pointing at a star. He looked at the work in front of him and got back to it. The first letters of war had been sent and received and answered. The next moves were coming. Harry was ready for them. Chapter 4. The tournament's true prize the summer before 4th year was the best and the worst of the ones Harry had collected so far, which was saying something because the collection had been improving steadily since the first one in France when he was 9. The best part was France itself, a month at the Delacour house in July, which by now had the particular texture of a place that expects you, where the guest room had stopped being a guest room and started being Harry's room in the way rooms become yours when they stop hiding it. Apolline had added a second bookshelf. Jean-Pierre had left a chess set on the desk that he didn't mention and Harry didn't mention either, and they played on it every evening after dinner. The worst part was that Fleur was 17 now, and Harry was 14, and the 3 years between them had been a fact since the beginning, but it was a fact that had changed its quality. When she was 13 and he was 9, 3 years was a piece of topology, just the shape of the thing, unchanging. Now it was more like weather. Present, noticeable, requiring acknowledgement. She was the same, sharper and warmer in equal measure, the warmth getting slightly less hidden every year as she apparently decided that hiding it was more effort than it was worth. The arguing about books had evolved into something that was genuinely collaborative, both of them building on each other's thinking in ways that neither would reach alone. She'd made full prefect at Beauxbatons, which surprised no one, and she carried the authority of it the way she carried everything, like it had always been there, and she'd simply claimed it. The bond was different at 17 and 14 than it had been at 13 and 9. It had weight and substance, and its own specific language, not words, not images, more like the awareness of a presence in a room you're not looking at. Harry knew when Fleur was unsettled the way he knew when the weather was changing. He suspected she knew the same about him, and he was right, because she had twice in the past year sent letters timed so precisely to moments when things were difficult at Hogwarts that the coincidence was not a coincidence. Gabrielle was 12 and deeply pleased about this in the way of someone whose predictions were coming true ahead of schedule. She had, over the past 3 years, developed into a person of formidable emotional precision. She didn't miss anything, she never had, But now she had the vocabulary to name what she noticed and the confidence to name it out loud. She was going to be extraordinary, Harry thought, when she got to Beau's Batons. He told her so directly one afternoon on the coast path. She said, "I know," with complete serenity, and then asked him whether he'd read the paper she'd found in the library about the theoretical upper limit of Veela fire generation, because she had questions. He had read it. They talked about it for an hour. Gabrielle's questions were better than most adults' questions, and had been since she was 9. The worst part of the summer, the part that sat underneath all the good parts like a stone under good soil, was what Apolline told him in the 3rd week of July. She told him at breakfast, which was her preference for difficult conversations because breakfast gave everyone something to do with their hands. Jean-Pierre was there, which meant it was serious. The Triwizard Tournament, she said. Reinstated this year at Hogwarts. Beau's Batons would be sending a delegation. Fleur was planning to enter. Harry had known about the tournament in the abstract. It had come up in the Hogwarts rumor mill as early as June, imprecise whispers about something big being planned for the school year. But the confirmation landed differently than the rumor. "Fleur wants to compete," he said. "Yes," Apolline said. "You're going to let her?" "She is 17 and the decision is hers to make," Apolline said, which was not the same as yes and was exactly the same as yes. "What does the bond do?" Harry said. "If she's in danger." He said it flat and direct because that was what the question was and there was no version of asking it that wasn't that. Apolline was quiet for a moment. Jean-Pierre set down his coffee. "The bond does not create obligation," Apolline said carefully. "You know this. But it creates awareness," Harry said. "You told me. Emotional resonance in extreme situations." "Yes. So if she's in the 2nd task or the 3rd task and something goes wrong, I'll know." "You may feel it," Apolline said. "With more intensity than you are accustomed to." Harry thought about this. "And if I'm at Hogwarts and she's in the task and something goes wrong and I feel it, you will be a spectator," Apolline said. "Not a champion. You will be required to remain a spectator." Harry met her eyes. "Yes," he said. "I will be required to." Jean-Pierre made a sound that was not quite a laugh and stood up to get more coffee. Apolline looked at Harry for a long moment. Something moved across her face that was not quite concern. She was past concern, she'd processed this before she sat down for breakfast, and was more like the precise acknowledgement of someone who knows a force of nature is coming and has done everything they can think of to prepare. "Harry," she said, "the tournament is dangerous. It has always been dangerous. Fleur is—" She paused. "She is one of the most capable young witches in France. I would not allow her to enter if I did not believe she was equipped." "I know," he said. "What I am about to tell you is not common knowledge," she said. "And it requires that you keep it so." He waited. "I have reason to believe the tournament's reinstatement is not." She chose her words with the care of a woman choosing specific arrows. "Straightforward. There are people involved in its organization who have interests that are not aligned with the tournament's stated purpose. I have been investigating this since the announcement in May. I do not yet know the shape of it." Harry felt something go very still inside him. "Lucius," he said. "Among others," Apolline said. "He is one thread. The pattern they are part of is larger." "What pattern?" "That," she said, "is what I'm still finding out." She looked at him steadily. "I need you to go back to Hogwarts this year with your eyes open. Not afraid. Not reactive. Open." "I'm always open," Harry said. "I know," she said. "That is why I am telling you." The Beau's Batons carriages arrived in October on a cold, bright afternoon that made the whole Scottish sky look like something deliberately composed, and Harry stood in the crowd of students on the front steps and watched the horses pull them down out of the clouds, enormous pale blue things, winged, magical, unreal, and felt the bond pull sharply and warm, both threads of it, before the carriage door opened. Fleur descended the steps with 8 other Beau's Batons students, and the Veela allure went off like a flash bang across the crowd, which Harry registered and simply stepped around the way you step around weather, and then she was standing on the Hogwarts grounds looking at the castle with her chin up and her hair down, and the specific expression of someone placing a new location in their mental map. She found him in the crowd in about 4 seconds. The expression shifted. Not dramatically, just the particular softening at the corners that she'd stopped trying to prevent sometime around last Christmas. He nodded at her across the crowd of students, and she nodded back, precise and composed, and then Madame Maxime was directing the Beauxbatons students inside and Harry went with the Hogwarts crowd, and that was the greeting, which was the right greeting for the audience, and both of them knew it. They managed a real conversation that evening after the welcome feast, in the library. Hermione's suggestion, who had been corresponding with Fleur independently for 2 years at this point and greeted her with the warmth of someone meeting a long-distance friend in person for the first time, which was exactly what it was. "The castle is extraordinary," Fleur said, looking up at the library ceiling. "Wait until you see the 3rd floor on a Tuesday," Harry said. "The staircases do something structural. Neville and I mapped it." "Of course you mapped it," she said. "Wouldn't you?" She looked at him. "I would have started with the 4th floor," she said, which was as good as yes. Hermione, who had been watching this exchange with the expression she used when she was collating data about people, said, "The restricted section is actually accessible from the west staircase if you time it right." Harry worked out the sequence in 2nd year. "2nd year?" Fleur repeated, with a particular tone. "I was bored," Harry said. "You are never bored," Fleur said. "You are always doing something and you call it bored when you haven't found the right thing yet." Hermione pointed at Fleur. "That," she said to Harry, "is exactly what I have been saying for 3 years." Harry looked at both of them. "I'm surrounded," he said. "You like it," Gabrielle would have said if she were there. She wasn't there yet, but her absence had a familiar shape. The Goblet of Fire stood in the entrance hall for 3 days before the champion selection, blue-white fire burning in a wooden cup that was simple and ancient and radiated old magic the way the oldest things in the Delacour library radiated old magic, not loudly, not dramatically, just presently, with the certainty of something that has been doing what it does for a very long time. Fleur put her name in on the 2nd morning. Harry watched her cross the age line. Dumbledore had drawn it in silver dust the first day, 17 and older only, with the particular walk she had when she was being deliberate about something, very straight, very sure. The fire went briefly brighter when her slip went in, which Harry noticed and Hermione noticed, and which no one who wasn't paying close attention would have caught. Harry didn't put his name in. This was not a decision he agonized over. He was 14, below the age line, and more importantly the tournament was already a thing he intended to watch closely rather than participate in, because Apolline's warning about the shape of things was sitting in the back of his mind with the weight of something true. He stood on the right side of the age line and watched Fleur, and Fleur, crossing back, gave him a look that asked a question. He answered it with a slight shake of his head. She nodded once and moved on. The night of the selection, the Goblet sent up 3 names in succession: Cedric Diggory for Hogwarts, Victor Crumb for Durmstrang, Fleur Delacour for Beauxbatons, and Harry, sitting at the Gryffindor table, felt the bond warm and bright when her name was called, Gabrielle's thread and his own together, recognition and pride moving through it like light through water. Fleur stood up. The hall looked at her. She looked back at the hall with the composed excellence of someone who has won a thing they intended to win and finds the attention appropriate. Harry clapped, which meant Ron clapped, which meant Hermione clapped, which meant the Gryffindor table clapped with more enthusiasm than it might have had for a Beauxbatons champion otherwise. Then the goblet flared a 4th time. A 4th slip of paper. A name that came out of the cup with the particular wrongness of a note played off-key. Harry Potter. The hall went absolutely silent. Harry sat very still. Dumbledore read the name off the slip in a voice that was carefully controlled. McGonagall's expression went tight. Madame Maxime's head came up sharply. Fleur, who had already moved toward the door to the side chamber, turned around. Harry looked at the slip in Dumbledore's hand. Then he looked at the goblet, which had gone back to its ordinary blue-white and gave nothing away. Then he looked at Dumbledore. "I didn't enter," he said, into the silence, clearly enough that the whole hall heard it. "Harry," Dumbledore said very carefully. "Come here, please." Harry stood up. He was aware of every eye in the hall on him, which was not a new experience, and he moved through it the way he always moved through things, without performance, without hurry. He walked to the front of the hall and stood in front of Dumbledore and looked up at him. Dumbledore handed him the slip. It said Harry Potter in handwriting that was not his. "This is not my writing," Harry said. "No," Dumbledore agreed. "And the age line would not have prevented someone from entering your name on your behalf," Dumbledore said. "An older student, or an adult," Harry said. He looked at the slip again. He looked at the goblet. He thought about Apolline's letter, the pattern they are part of is larger. "Harry," Dumbledore said, and his voice had dropped, just between them, the hall's silence notwithstanding. "Are you all right?" "Yes," Harry said. "I'm fine." He handed the slip back. "What happens now?" "The magical contract the goblet creates binds me to compete," Harry said. "I know. I've read about it." He paused. "What I want to know is who entered my name and why." "That," Dumbledore said, and he sounded genuinely troubled, which Harry catalogued as important, "is what I intend to find out." From across the hall, Fleur was looking at him. Her expression was very still and very focused, and through the bond he felt something sharp and certain. Not fear, she didn't do fear in public, but a fierce, concentrated attention that was better than fear. She was already thinking. Already working it. Harry gave her the smallest possible nod. "I'm fine. We'll talk." She gave him nothing back visibly. But through the bond, something settled. The side chamber contained Cedric and Crumb and Fleur and then Harry, and the ministry official, a small man named Bagman with the specific energy of someone who is very enthusiastic about something and not quite tracking the undercurrents in the room, explained that yes, for champions, unprecedented, exciting, what a year this would be. Fleur's expression during this speech had the particular quality of someone watching a weather forecast they already know is wrong. Crouch arrived. Percy Weasley arrived, which was odd enough in its own right. The question of how was raised and not answered. The question of must Harry compete was answered. Yes, the contract was binding, there was no legal mechanism to withdraw him. Bagman was sorry, but the rules were clear. Harry listened to all of it and asked one question. "When is the first task?" "November 24th, Bagman said. "Thank you," Harry said. He went to find Fleur afterward, in the corridor outside the chamber where the Beauxbatons students had gathered in a concerned cluster. Madame Maxime was talking to Dumbledore in the doorway, her enormous frame radiating displeasure in a way that filled the corridor. Fleur had extracted herself from the cluster and was standing slightly apart, waiting. "Someone entered you deliberately," she said when he reached her. Not a question. "Yes." Apolline's warning. "The shape she didn't know yet," Harry said. Fleur's jaw was set. "I'm going to write to her tonight." "I already have the letter half written in my head," Harry said. "She needs to know the details. The goblet behaving as a binding contract even for an underage student who didn't enter, that's not standard magic, that's been modified. Someone modified the goblet, or the contract it creates." Fleur looked at him with the expression she got when he'd gotten ahead of her thinking and she was deciding whether to be impressed or annoyed. She settled on a version of both. "You worked that out just now?" "I've been thinking about it since Dumbledore read my name." "You looked completely calm." "I was completely calm," Harry said. "You are 14. She said in a tone that was exasperated and something else, something she didn't put a word to. "I know," he said. "I'll write to your mother tonight." "What do you know about the tasks?" "Nothing specific. Historical tasks have involved dangerous creatures, obstacle courses, and judgment," Harry said. The champions were always judged on courage and resourcefulness as much as raw power. Yes. She looked at him steadily. Harry. You do not need to approach this the way the others will. You have advantages they don't. I know. Don't hide them, she said, and it was exactly what she would have said 3 years ago on a cliff above the Mediterranean, the same certainty. Whatever they've put you in this for, the answer is not to be smaller than you are. When have I ever been smaller than I am? He said. She looked at him. Something moved in her expression, the composed surface and the honest thing underneath it doing a complicated negotiation. Fair point, she said finally. Fleur. He said her name the way it was supposed to be said, not English flat. He'd learned the year before and she'd never said anything about it, but her expression always did. We'll figure out who did this. Your mother will know the political angle. Hermione and I will work the magical one. And in the meantime, you are apparently a Triwizard champion, she said. And then, briefly, quickly, a flash of something genuine. Win. Obviously, he said. The dragon. That was the first task. Harry worked it out 11 days before, through a combination of Hagrid's inability to maintain a secret when genuinely excited about something and a cross-reference in a magical creature's text about what the tournament committee had historically sourced from the same reserve in Romania. He told Fleur and Cedric both, Fleur because the bond made keeping things from her feel like trying to keep things from himself, and Cedric because he was decent, and it was a dragon and being decent cost nothing and decent people tended to be useful later. He did not tell Crumb. This was not malice. He simply did not know Crumb well enough to trust him yet, and trust was specific. He and Hermione spent 4 days working out his approach. She had 17 books open at one point and made notes in a system that Harry had never fully decoded but which always produced correct conclusions. The summoning charm, Hermione said on the afternoon of the task. I've been thinking that, Harry said. Long range, before the dragon reacts to your position. Get your broom. And then I'll fly it, he said. You're the youngest Hogwarts seeker in a century, she said. You can outfly a dragon. I can outfly most things, he said, which was honest rather than boastful. The egg, she said. Getting the egg without triggering the dragon's full aggression, move fast, stay low, get in and out before she fully commits, Harry said. If I get her attention focused on the broom and away from the egg, she'll follow the fast-moving thing, Hermione finished. Yes. That's the instinct. The egg is a secondary concern once she's chasing. Harry was quiet for a moment. Someone put me in this to kill me, he said. It was the first time he'd said it directly. Hermione had been circling it for days. She met his eyes. Yes, she said. That's the most logical conclusion. Doesn't change the approach, he said. Just good to name it. Are you frightened? Hermione asked. Harry thought about it genuinely. No, he said. Not about the dragon. He paused. About the parts one haven't seen yet. The pattern Apolline mentioned. The pattern is larger than one task, Harry said. The dragon is just the opening. Whoever did this wants something that a dragon provides. Either I die in the first task, or I survive the first task and the real trap comes later. Or the first task demonstrates something they need to observe, Hermione said quietly. Harry looked at her. Yes, he said. That too. He stood up. I'm going to be brilliant tomorrow. Yes, she said. You are. He was. The arena was full and loud and cold in the November way that cuts through the specific enthusiasm of a crowd gathered to watch something dangerous. Harry stood in the champion's tent and listened to the noise and breathed evenly. Fleur went first. Her approach was different from what Harry had expected. She used Veela fire, actually summoning it in a way that even most Veela couldn't manage at 17, a controlled, specific column of it that she drove at the dragon with extraordinary precision. She subdued the dragon's consciousness briefly, not fully but enough, It worked until the dragon shook off the trance near the end and she took a flame blast to her skirt, which she extinguished efficiently, and without breaking stride. Harry watched her exit the arena from the tent entrance. She was breathing hard but composed, and she'd gotten her egg, and the judges were marking their scores, and she walked past the tent entrance without stopping. Through the bond, he felt, "Your turn." Cedric went second. His approach was a conjunctivitis curse that was smart, and nearly worked completely until the dragon's movement threw off his aim, and he caught some tail damage that left him limping. He got the egg. He looked pale and winded coming out. Crumb went third, the conjunctivitis curse as well. He'd had the same red on vulnerability. His was more accurate than Cedric's, and he got his egg cleanly, though he accidentally damaged several of the other eggs in the process, which cost him points. Then Harry's name. He walked out into the cold and the noise, and the dragon, a Hungarian horntail, which he noted with part of his mind was the most aggressive species they could have drawn, and filed that as information, turned its enormous head toward him, and the air crackled with the possibility of what came next. He raised his wand. "Accio Firebolt," he said. The broom came. He heard the crowd's sound shift when it appeared, recognition of what he was doing, and then the held breath of watching whether it would work, and then the collective exhale as he was airborne and the dragon came after him, and the whole enormous creature was a fraction of a second too slow. He flew the way he flew when there was nothing else, not thinking, just doing, body and broom and air, and the particular joy of it that he'd had since his first time on a school broom in first year, when it turned out that the one thing he'd always had, even before he knew he was magical, was this. The dragon was fast. He was faster. He went low, came around, lost her attention for 3 critical seconds behind the arena walls, dropped, got the egg, was back in the air before she turned. Clean. 62 seconds total, which he'd not been counting but Hermione had, and which she told him later with the expression of someone who has just watched a hypothesis confirmed spectacularly. The judges gave him 47 out of 50. The highest score of the 4 champions. He walked out of the arena and Fleur was there, waiting, which she hadn't been for Cedric or Crumb because she'd been at the champions' platform with the others. She'd stepped off it, and come to the arena exit, and when he came through the gate she looked at him for one long moment with an expression he didn't have a word for yet, but that went all the way down to the bone. "Well," she said. "Dragon," he said. "You made it look simple," she said. "It wasn't simple," he said. "It was just practice thinking. Rapid application. Don't minimize," she said with a sharpness that was affection underneath it. He smiled at her, and she looked at the smile for a moment, and then she turned and they walked back to the champions' platform together, which was noticed by several people and noted by a few, and Harry didn't care in the slightest. Apolline's letter about who had entered his name arrived in December, 2 weeks after the first task. She had been thorough. The investigation had involved 3 separate ministry contacts, one Gringotts archivist who owed Jean-Pierre a favor, and a woman in the Department of Mysteries whose name Apolline did not include in the letter but whose information she clearly trusted. The summary: Bartemius Crouch Jr., currently believed dead, was alive. He had been in his father's service since his mother's death and was currently, and here Apolline's writing went very precise, the way it went when she was managing her own reaction, currently at Hogwarts, concealed. She did not know in what form. She suspected he was the one who had entered Harry's name, acting under the direction of someone whose goal was not simply Harry's death but Harry's delivery, to a specific place, at a specific time, through the mechanism of the tournament's final task. The final task was a maze. The cup was inside it. Harry sat with this for a long time. He showed the letter to Hermione, who read it twice and then said, "The cup. If the cup is the portkey, then wherever it takes the winner is where they want me," Harry said. "We have to tell Dumbledore," Hermione said. "Eventually," Harry said. "But if we tell Dumbledore now, whoever is running this finds out their plan is exposed and changes it. We need," he thought. "We need to know where the cup takes me before we tell Dumbledore. And we need a counter. Harry, Hermione. He looked at her steadily. I'm not saying don't tell him. I'm saying tell him at the right time. There's a difference. She held his gaze. Then, with the specific exasperated respect she reserved for moments when Harry was being intelligent in a way she found personally inconvenient. Fine. But we work out the counter first, and I want to know every step of it. Obviously, he said. He wrote to Apolline that night. The letter asked for everything she knew about portkey destination modification, whether an established portkey's destination could be countered or redirected, and for a specific inventory of what Fleur knew, because Fleur's knowledge of advanced magic was a resource Harry had been building toward for 5 years, and this was the moment it was worth the most. Fleur's response came 3 days later, ahead of Apolline's, and it was 8 pages of dense magical theory and practical application notes, and at the top, before the theory, I knew something was wrong with the cup. I've felt it since they placed it in the maze for testing. The magic on it is not standard. I didn't know what I was feeling, but I know it now that you've named it. Meet me in the library tomorrow at 7. Bring Hermione. Harry read it, and felt the bond sharp and warm and absolutely certain. He was not going to die in a maze. He was not going to be delivered anywhere. And the person who had engineered this was going to find out, very soon, what it meant to have arranged the destruction of someone who was already fully defined, already thoroughly himself, and who had spent 5 years building exactly the things you would need to dismantle a plan like this. He put the letter away and looked out the tower window at the winter grounds and thought about the summer when he was 9, and the world had rearranged itself around a new axis on a Thursday morning in Diagon Alley. He thought about a compass. He thought about north. He was ready. Chapter 5, Fire and Silver. The second task was underwater, and Harry had known about it since December. The egg had told him. The screaming inside it resolved into a mermaid song when submerged, which he'd worked out 3 days after the first task by the simple method of filling the prefect's bathroom with water and dunking the egg in it, which Hermione had called lateral thinking and Ron had called obvious in retrospect. The song described something taken, something loved, 1 hour to get it back, what was lost forever would stay lost. Standard hostage mechanics. The lake. He'd spent January and February preparing, which meant he'd spent January and February in the kind of focused, joyful problem-solving that was his natural state when the problem was interesting enough. Gillyweed from Neville, who'd found the reference in a library book because Harry had pointed him toward the right shelf and Neville had done the rest. Neville was, Harry had come to understand, extraordinarily good when someone trusted him with a real problem rather than a simple one. Underwater spellwork theory with Hermione, who'd read every relevant text and had opinions about all of them. Navigation methodology with Fleur, who came from a coastal family and knew more about water magic than anyone else in the castle. What was taken from Harry turned out to be Ron, asleep on the lake floor looking extremely irritated, even unconscious, which Harry took as deeply characteristic. He got him back in 47 minutes, which left 13 minutes he used to help Fleur, who came for Gabrielle and whose timing was slightly off because of a leglocker jinx someone cast on her at the starting platform, subtle enough to be missed, and Harry, surfacing near her target point, used those 13 minutes to find Gabrielle on the lake floor first and get her closer to the surface before Fleur arrived. He didn't think about it as a decision. It wasn't a decision. Gabrielle was 12 and asleep on a lake floor and Harry was there, so he went. He and Ron surfaced together and Fleur surfaced seconds later with Gabrielle, and Fleur grabbed Gabrielle and then looked at Harry with an expression that said several things at once and none of them were small. "You found her," Fleur said, treading water, her hair plastered flat and her voice doing something complicated. "I was in the area," Harry said. "You were not in the area," she said. Gabrielle said, still half asleep and coughing. "Lake water is fine. Stop fussing. You were asleep on the lake floor," Fleur told her. "It was a very comfortable lake floor," Gabrielle said. Harry laughed, and Fleur looked at him over the top of Gabrielle's head with that expression he still didn't have one word for but which had accumulated meaning over 5 years the way interest accumulated, steadily, inevitably, compounding. He got second place in the task, 2 minutes behind Cedric, and the judges gave him bonus points for moral fiber, which Ron found hilarious and which Harry thought was a slightly odd category for an international magical competition but did not say so. Fleur got fourth. The leg locker jinx had cost her enough time to be consequential, and she accepted the scoring with a composure that Harry recognized as controlled fury, the kind she saved for things that were genuinely unfair and that she intended to do something about later. He went to her after the scores were posted and said quietly, so only she could hear, "The jinx. Someone at the starting platform." "I know," she said. "I felt it. I thought I'd imagined it at first." "You didn't imagine it." "No." Her jaw was set. "This is connected." "Yes," he said. "Same pattern. Keep you from performing your best. Keep me visible. Set the stage for the third task." She looked at him. "The maze." "The maze?" he confirmed. They were standing by the lake's edge with the crowd still cheering behind them and the April sun doing its best with the Scottish sky, and Fleur was still dripping lake water and her hair was still flat, and she was still the most compelling person Harry had ever been in a room with, or a lakeshore with, or anywhere with. A fact he'd been aware of for approximately 5 years and that had changed its quality over those 5 years without changing its direction. "I'm going to be in that maze," she said, not asking. "I know," he said. "Not as a competitor." She said it flatly. "As backup." "Fleur, no," she said, with the specific finality of someone who has thought this through and is not presenting it for discussion. "I am not going to stand at the entrance of that maze and wait. I know what's at the end of it. You know what's at the end of it. We are not going to have a conversation about whether I'm involved." Harry looked at her for a moment. "I wasn't going to say no," he said. "I was going to say we need a plan." She paused. Then, slightly less flatly, "Oh. The maze opens on the south end," he said. "The cup is somewhere in the center. They haven't finalized placement yet, but based on the testing runs I've been tracking, center right. If someone gets into the maze from the perimeter, the hedges are 12 feet. She said, thinking now rather than arguing. "And they're warded against flight approaching from outside," he said. "But not against someone already in the maze going over." "Broom," she said. "Firebolt's the fastest. Low-profile entrance on the north perimeter before the task starts. Stay ahead of the wards, wait for the signal." "What signal?" "I'll set one. Something you'll recognize." She thought about it. "The French word," she said. "For fire." "Th," Harry said. "Cast it as light," she said. "I'll see it from anywhere in the maze." Harry looked at her. Something in him that had been building quietly for a long time said simply, "This." Not dramatically. Just with the certainty of a compass settling. "All right," he said. She nodded once, decisive. "Good." Then, after a pause, "And Harry, yes." "Thank you," she said. "For Gabrielle." "You don't need to. I know I don't need to," she said. "I want to." Her voice had dropped to something that was only for him. She is the most important person in the world to me. And you just, without thinking, she's important to me too," Harry said. Simply. Just the fact. Fleur looked at him. The lake was behind her, and the Scottish sky was above her, and she was still dripping, and Harry was 14, and she was almost 18, and none of that was irrelevant, but none of it was the most important thing either. "I know," she said. "I know she is." Apolline arrived at Hogwarts the 3rd week of May. She didn't announce it in advance. She simply appeared at the gates on a Tuesday morning and Dumbledore met her there, which meant he'd been expecting her or had been informed, and Harry found out when she sent a house elf to find him in the middle of History of Magic, which caused Binns to lose his entire thread for 4 minutes. He found her in one of the smaller sitting rooms off the entrance hall, which Dumbledore had apparently offered her without being asked, which said something about how Dumbledore read Apolline's presence. She stood up when Harry came in. She looked at him the way she'd looked at him in Diagon Alley when he was 9, with that precise and measuring attention, except now there were 5 years of accumulated knowledge behind it, and the assessment was correspondingly deeper. "You look well," she said. "I am well," he said. "What do you know?" She smiled slightly. "Sit down," she said. He sat. She sat across from him, the same configuration as every important conversation they'd ever had, Apolline across from Harry, clarity moving between them. "I know the destination," she said. "Of the portkey." "Where?" "A place called Little Hangleton," she said. "A graveyard. There is a house nearby, the Riddle House. It has been associated with—" She paused, and Harry understood that the pause was about how to say the next thing, not about whether to say it. "With Voldemort." "With his family?" "His father's grave is there." Harry was still for a moment. "He's going to be there." "Yes." "Or someone acting for him." "Crouch Jr.," she said. "We're certain now. He has been impersonating someone at Hogwarts. A ministry official. Using Polyjuice Potion." She said it with the specific disgust of someone who finds deception through appearance personally offensive. "We believe he has been influencing the maze's construction." "Dumbledore knows this?" "He knows some of it," Apolline said. "He does not know the destination. He does not know about the graveyard. I received this information this morning from my contact in the Department of Mysteries and I came directly here." She looked at him steadily. "We need to tell him." "Yes," Harry said. Now, she agreed. She stood. "I have one more thing to tell you before we speak with him." She said it with the particular weight of something that had been held for the right moment. Harry waited. "The portkey can be counter-charmed," she said. "Not broken, the magic on it is too established for that. But redirected. If someone with sufficient knowledge and the right intent modifies the destination anchor before the task begins, the cup will take whoever touches it somewhere else entirely." Harry processed this. "Can you do it?" "No," she said. "The charm requires the hands of someone bound to the target. Someone whose magic is tied to the person the trap is set for." She looked at him. "Me," Harry said. "You," she confirmed. "Or one of my daughters. Fleur's already in the plan to be in the maze," Harry said. "I know," Apolline said, and did not ask how she knew, because she always knew. "Which means she can do it if she reaches the cup first. Or you can do it before the task begins if I give you the incantation." "Both," Harry said. "Both of us will know it." Redundancy. Apolline looked at him with the expression she'd had since he was 9, that quiet, settled acknowledgement of something she'd known was coming and was glad to see arriving. "Yes," she said. "Both." The conversation with Dumbledore was the most direct one Harry had ever had with him, and possibly the most direct one anyone had had with Dumbledore in some time, judging by the quality of his listening. Apolline presented. Harry supplemented. Dumbledore sat behind his desk and listened with his hands folded and his expression moving through several careful configurations as the full shape of the plan became clear. The impersonation, the goblet modification, the portkey destination, the graveyard, the name either of them said but that sat in the room like a presence. When they'd finished, Dumbledore was quiet for a long time. "The man impersonating Alastor Moody," he said finally. "Yes," Harry said. "Crouch Jr. Polyjuice. I should have." Dumbledore stopped. "He was very good at it," Harry said, not unkindly. "I didn't work it out until December and I was looking." Dumbledore looked at him. "You've been looking since October." "Since my name came out of the goblet," Harry said. "Yes." Another long pause. Then, "What do you need from me?" "Access to the impersonator before the task," Harry said. "Proof and containment. And," he glanced at Apolline, "I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing in that maze." "Harry, I'm not asking you to stay out of it," Harry said. "I'm asking you to trust the plan we already have rather than building a new one over the top of it. Overlapping plans create confusion, and confusion is how people get hurt." Dumbledore looked at him for a moment that had the quality of genuine surprise, the kind that landed differently from the recalibration surprise Harry was used to seeing. This was the surprise of a man encountering something he hadn't accounted for in any of his long arcs. "All right," Dumbledore said. He said it like someone setting something down. "All right." They dealt with Crouch Jr. that evening. Dumbledore, Snape, and 2 aurists. Apolline had owed the Ministry and had them there within 3 hours, which was the fastest Harry had seen the Ministry move on anything, and which said something about Apolline's specific leverage in that institution. The real Moody was found in the impostor's office, trapped in his own magical trunk in a compartment that had been magically deepened, alive and extremely furious. The impostor, caught mid-transformation when Dumbledore stunned him, was taken to the Ministry. He confirmed, under Veritaserum, the destination of the portkey, the identity of his master, and the names of 3 other individuals involved in the plan's outer edges, one of whom was, Harry noted with unsurprise, connected to Lucius Malfoy. Apolline sent 2 letters the moment she heard the name. Harry didn't ask what was in them. He trusted the process. The night before the 3rd task, Harry sat in the castle grounds in the early dark and worked through the portkey countercharm until it was automatic, until he could feel the exact moment the magic accepted his intent and locked the destination into something other than Little Hangleton. He practiced it on 3 different objects before he felt sure enough to stop practicing. Fleur found him there at 9:30, came out through the side door with 2 cups of tea from somewhere. He never found out where she'd gotten tea at that hour, and sat next to him on the stone bench without preamble. She handed him a cup. He took it. They sat for a while in the quiet that was theirs now, the one they'd built over 5 years of coast paths and libraries and arguments about books and letters that ran to 8 pages and grew into something that was its own language. "I know the incantation," she said. "So do I," he said. "One of us will reach the cup first," she said. "Whichever one does it, the other covers." "Yes." "And then we get out," she said. "Both of us. Out of the maze and back on the grounds, and we tell Dumbledore everything we found." "Yes," he said. "That's the whole plan." Fleur wrapped both hands around her tea. The grounds were dark and cool around them, the castle above them lit from inside, the sound of the lake somewhere in the distance. "I am not afraid for myself in that maze," she said quietly. "I know," he said. "I'm afraid." She stopped. Started again. "When your name came out of that goblet, I felt it before Dumbledore finished reading it. The bond. Like something cold." She said it with the precision of someone describing a physical sensation, not performing emotion. "I have felt that once before. When my grandmother died and my mother felt it, and it came through her into, it was the same quality. Cold and sudden." "I know," Harry said. "I felt it too. From your end." He paused. "And from Gabrielle's." Fleur looked at him sharply. "Gabrielle felt it? She wrote to me the next day," he said. "She said she'd woken up at exactly the moment my name was read." Fleur was quiet for a long moment. "She didn't tell me that." "She didn't want you to worry more than you were already worrying," Harry said. Fleur made a sound that was about half exasperation and half something softer. "She is 12 years old, and she is managing me," she said. "She's been managing you since she was 6, Harry said. "You've told me the stories." "Yes." Fleur looked at her tea. "She asked me last week if I was going to tell you." She said it carefully, the specific care of someone navigating close to something significant. Harry held his cup with both hands. The warmth of it was pleasant in the cool night. "Tell me what?" he said. Fleur was quiet for long enough that it was its own answer. "Then," she said, "I keep waiting for the right time, and she says there is no right time, there is only time, and I should use some of it." She said it in one sentence, faster than she usually spoke, which meant she was not going to stop and revise it. Harry turned to look at her. She was looking straight ahead at the dark grounds, her profile sharp and clear. "Fleur," he said. "I know you are 14, she said, still looking straight ahead. "I know I am almost 18. I know the difference is something that matters now and matters less later, and I know the bond did not create this. I know it only recognized something that was already. She stopped. I am not saying this well. You're saying it fine, he said. She turned to look at him then. Her expression was the honest one, the real one, the one underneath all the composed surfaces, and it had nothing hidden in it. I don't want anything from you that isn't yours to give, she said. Not because of the bond. Not because of what we are to each other in the magic's terms. Just, she exhaled. Just because it's you. And because you have always been. She seemed to run out of words, which was unusual enough that it said everything the words didn't. Harry looked at her for a long moment. 5 years of coast paths and libraries and arguments about books. 5 years of letters and French lessons in Occitan and the library at the Delacour house and Christmas weeks and bond threads going stronger every year. 5 years of being exactly themselves in each other's company without performance or reduction. I know, he said. I've known for a while. You're 14, she said, and now it sounded like something she was reminding herself rather than him. Yes, he said. I am. And I'm also very much the same person I'm going to be at 17, and at 20, because people don't change their nature, they just grow more into it. He paused. And you know exactly who I am? Yes, she said. I do. Then you know this isn't going anywhere, he said. The compass doesn't change its reading. Fleur looked at him for a long time, and her expression did something that started at the honest one and went somewhere further, somewhere quieter and more settled. No, she said. It doesn't. They sat for a while longer in the good dark, drinking their tea, the castle above them and the lake somewhere in the distance, and the maze standing in the grounds to the south, waiting for tomorrow. He was ready for tomorrow. The third task began at dusk. Harry and Cedric and Fleur and Victor Crumb stood at the maze entrance while Bagman explained the rules to a crowd that was too excited to be quiet, and the hedges loomed above all of them. 12 feet of solid dark green that smelled like cut grass and old magic, and something underneath that was less pleasant. Harry had charmed the firebolt to follow a specific route and wait at the north perimeter at a specific time, keyed to a delayed activation. He'd worked out the charm in April and tested it twice, and it would work, and Fleur knew where to find it. He looked at Cedric beside him, steady, decent Cedric, who had gotten a version of the same warning Harry had and who was here anyway because he was genuinely brave in the particular way of people who are afraid and do the thing regardless. Stay out of the center until you've mapped your route, Harry told him, quietly. The maze modifications will try to disorient. Look for the patterns, they're not random. Cedric looked at him. You know a lot about this maze. Yes, Harry said. Cedric considered this. Thank you, he said, and meant it. Bagman fired his wand and the task began, and Harry went in. The maze was different from what he'd expected and exactly what he'd expected. The construction followed a logic he'd been studying for 3 months. The pattern of the modifications Crouch had introduced, the specific ways the hedges had been adjusted. He moved through it not quickly but decisively, which was faster than quickly, because indecision was the real time cost in a maze and he made his decisions in advance. Spiders, stunning spells, 2 of them, immediate. A boggart, laughed at it directly, which was the shortest possible engagement. A section of hedge animated to tangle, incendio, clean. A dark magic area near the center that felt like the cold thing he'd felt from the bond in October. He circled it, didn't engage, found the gap in the left hedge where the modification was thinnest. He found the cup. It was standing in a clearing in the center right of the maze, exactly where he'd estimated, sitting on a plinth that was doing nothing suspicious and radiating the specific quality of modified magic, the portkey destination anchor. He felt it the moment he was close enough, the wrongness of it, like a word you know is a lie because the speaker's cadence changed. He looked at the cup. He thought about Little Hangleton and a graveyard and the name no one said. He raised his wand. The countercharm was 17 syllables in Old French, which he'd chosen partly because it was the right language for the working and partly because it fit his magical signature in a way English incantations didn't quite manage anymore, something that had changed gradually over years of French language magical study, and which Fleur had noticed before he had. He said all 17 syllables with the precise intent Apolline had described, the destination anchor unwinding from Little Hangleton and being replaced with something he'd chosen. The Hogwarts grounds, 50 meters north of the maze entrance, open air. He felt the cup's magic accept the change. Then he heard movement in the hedge to his right and Fleur stepped through a gap she'd cut with a severing charm, broom in hand, hair wild from flying, and looked at the cup. "Done?" she said. "Done," he said. "Victor is down," she said, moving fast now. "Something hit him near the center, dark magic, I think from the modifications. He's stunned, not seriously hurt. Cedric is in the eastern section still. We need to get Cedric out," Harry said. "I know." She was already moving back to the hedge gap. "I'll find him. You wait for me at the cup. Fleur, I'm faster on the broom in the open sections," she said, which was true, the maze had wide corridors that the firebolt could navigate. "Wait here. I'll bring him." He waited. She came back in 4 minutes with Cedric, who was limping from a curse he'd caught on his left leg, supporting himself on a vine he transfigured into a makeshift crutch with an efficiency Harry found impressive for someone in pain. Fleur was at his other side, broom abandoned in favor of being a person's support. "There's a portkey in it," Harry told Cedric about the cup. "It's been modified. It's safe now. I changed the destination. But you should know." Cedric looked at him. "Modified to go where?" "Somewhere you wouldn't have come back from," Harry said plainly. Cedric was quiet for a moment. "And now?" "Hogwarts grounds," Harry said. 50 meters north of the entrance." Cedric exhaled. Then he held out his hand toward the cup. "All right," he said. "Together?" Harry looked at Fleur. She looked back at him. "Together," Harry said. The three of them grabbed the cup at the same moment, and the world went sideways and they landed in a heap on the Hogwarts grounds 50 meters north of the maze entrance in the cool May evening air, with the crowd noise suddenly surrounding them and Bagman's voice somewhere in the distance asking what had happened, and none of the three of them particularly caring about the answer to that question yet. Harry sat up on the grass. The cup was beside him, inert now, portkey exhausted. The stars were out. The castle was lit above them. Fleur was already sitting up, checking Cedric's leg with the focused efficiency she brought to all medical situations, which she'd gotten from Apolline and which manifested as the particular competence of someone who has learned that caring for people is a skill and practiced it deliberately. "You changed the destination," Cedric said, looking at the cup. He sounded slightly awed. "You, the Triwizard Cup. You changed where it went." "Old French countercharm," Harry said. 17 syllables. "Where did you?" Cedric stopped. "Apolline Delacour," he said. "Yes," Harry said. Cedric laughed, slightly delirious with relief and pain and the specific gratitude of someone who has just narrowly avoided something permanent. "Of course," he said. "Of course it was." The grounds were filling with people now, Dumbledore moving fast, McGonagall, Madame Pomfrey already at Cedric's leg. Aurors, because Apolline had made sure there were Aurors at the maze perimeter, a precaution that everyone was now very grateful for. Bagman somewhere in the distance sounding confused. Harry stood up. Fleur stood up beside him, dust on her robes and her hair still wild. She looked at the maze entrance, then at the cup, then at Harry. "The graveyard," she said quietly. "If we hadn't, we did," he said. She looked at him. The composed surface was entirely gone, which only happened in private, and this was not private, but she wasn't reconstructing it, and that was new. "Yes," she said. "We did." Dumbledore reached them and looked at all three of them with an expression that held an entire unspoken conversation about the events of the past 8 months, and then looked at the cup, and looked at Harry. "Old French," Harry said before Dumbledore could ask. 17 syllables. It goes to the north grounds now. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Is Crouch Jr. in custody? Since 2 days ago, Harry said. Your Aurors have him. The graveyard is empty, Harry said. Or rather, whatever was there is still there and knows the plan failed. Which is information you can use. Dumbledore looked at Harry, and at Fleur, and at the cup. Then at Harry again. Yes, he said slowly. Yes, it is. He turned to coordinate with the Aurors. Apolline appeared through the crowd. Harry hadn't known she was still at Hogwarts. He'd thought she'd left after the Crouch situation, and she came to Fleur first, took her daughter's face in her hands and looked at her, and then turned to Harry and did the same thing, both hands on either side of his face, looking at him directly. Bien, she said. Good. She released him. Both of you. Good. It was, Harry thought, the most he'd ever wanted to hear from anyone. The aftermath took weeks. Crouch Jr.'s testimony under Veritaserum, combined with Apolline's ministry contacts and the documentation from Gringotts and the Department of Mysteries, built a picture that the Daily Prophet initially refused to print and then couldn't stop printing once the full shape of it was established. Voldemort. The name was in every headline by the second week of June. The careful avoidance of it suddenly looking as hollow as it had always been, was returned in spirit and partial form, the ritual incomplete, the portkey that would have delivered a fresh blood sacrifice redirected to the Hogwarts grounds. Lucius Malfoy's name appeared in the testimony of 2 of Crouch Jr.'s known contacts. It appeared in the Gringotts records in connection with funding that had no clean explanation. It appeared in the Ministry's International Cooperation files in connection with the tournament's reinstatement in a way that would take a full investigation to unravel, which investigation was now underway. He was, as of the last week of June, under formal inquiry. Not arrested. His lawyers were excellent and his remaining influence was considerable, but the inquiry was there, and Apolline's 2 letters sent the night of Crouch Jr.'s confirmation had apparently been to exactly the right people in exactly the right positions to ensure the inquiry went forward regardless of what Malfoy's lawyers argued. Harry watched this from Hogwarts with the particular attention of someone who understood that the defeat of a plan was not the same as the defeat of the planner, and filed everything away. He had 1 more year of school and then the rest of whatever came after, and Lucius Malfoy's patient long game was going to require a patient long response, and Harry had learned patience from the best. Fleur left Hogwarts at the end of May, Beauxbaton's term ending before Hogwarts. She found Harry in the library the morning of her last day. Hermione was there too, which she acknowledged with the warmth of long correspondence finally manifested in person, and gave Hermione a book she'd brought from the Delacour library that she'd been meaning to bring all year and kept forgetting, which made Hermione go slightly incandescent with gratitude. Then she turned to Harry. They went out to the grounds without discussion, because the library wasn't the right place for the last conversation of a school year, and stood near the lake where the second task had started, which felt appropriate in its way. You'll come to France in July, she said. The whole summer, he said. Your mother already wrote. She didn't tell me that, Fleur said, with the specific exasperation of someone whose mother manages her life with great effectiveness and minimal notification. She told me you'd probably be annoyed, Harry said. Fleur looked at the lake. The June morning was warm and the water was still, and somewhere beneath it the merpeople were doing whatever merpeople did in summer, which Harry had begun to suspect was mostly sleeping. I am not annoyed, she said. No, he agreed. She was quiet for a moment. Then, last night. On the grounds. When we landed. Yes, he said, because he knew which part she meant. I didn't reconstruct, she said. I notice, he said. In front of. She gestured generally at the memory of several hundred people. In front of everyone. Yes, he said. I don't know what that means yet, she said, honest and direct. I don't either, he said. But I'm not worried about it. She looked at him. Why not? Because the compass doesn't change its reading, he said. We have time. We've always had time. We've been becoming Whatever this is, since I was 9. A few more years of becoming is fine. He paused. As long as the becoming is happening. Fleur studied him for a long time. Then she said quietly, "You are the most patient person I have ever met, which is strange, because you are also the most immediate. You are fully present and also fully Longview at the same time, and I have never met anyone else who does that." "You do it too," he said. She stopped. Considered. "Maybe," she allowed, which for Fleur was enthusiastic agreement. "July," he said. "July," she confirmed. She left at noon. He stood at the gates and watched the Beauxbatons carriages lift and go, and felt the bond stretch, comfortable with distance now, 5 years of strengthening making it elastic rather than thin, and thought about the summer and the years after, and the shape of what was being built, slowly and thoroughly and with the same patience that all good things required. He thought about Lucius Malfoy under formal inquiry. He thought about Voldemort, incomplete and failed, wherever he'd gone to recollect himself, and about what came next. He thought about Apolline's 2 letters and what they had contained, which he'd never known and had decided not to ask because she would tell him when it mattered. He thought about Gabrielle, who had woken up at the exact moment his name was read and not told her sister because she didn't want Fleur to worry more, and who had written him a letter the next day that contained 1 sentence and a drawing. "I knew you'd be fine," and a compass rose with all 4 directions labeled and north circled twice. He thought about the coast path and the library and 17 syllables in Old French and a cup that went somewhere safe instead of somewhere final. He turned back to the castle. He had 1 more year of school, and things to learn, and a war to finish, and a life to build. He went back to work. Chapter 6. What the bond was always building toward the summer before 5th year was different from all the others in the way that the last of something is always different, not worse, just waited, aware of itself. Harry arrived in France on the 1st of July, and the Delacour house received him the way it had for 5 summers now, which was to say completely, without ceremony, the guest room that was his room already prepared and the kitchen already producing bread that was extraordinary. Gabrielle was 13 and had started Beauxbatons in September, and came home for summer with the particular energy of someone who has found their right place and can't stop talking about it, which Harry found deeply satisfying because he'd told her 2 years ago she was going to be extraordinary there, and being right about Gabrielle was one of his favorite things. Fleur was 18 and had graduated Beauxbatons in June with the highest marks in her year, which was also no surprise to anyone, and was in the strange suspended moment between school and whatever came next, which was where she was most herself. Without the structure of school to organize against, she organized against the world directly, which was formidable and occasionally exhausting and entirely Fleur. Harry was 15. And had changed in the way that people change between 14 and 15 when they're already essentially themselves, not in kind, but in degree. He was taller. He'd stopped being surprised by his own competence, which made him more competent rather than less. His magic had the quality that Fleur had described once as settled, the way a house settles into good foundations, not moving because it doesn't need to move. He sat at the kitchen table the first morning and drank extraordinary coffee and read a letter from Dumbledore that had arrived with him, forwarded from Hogwarts, and which asked him, politely and precisely, to attend a meeting at the British Ministry on the 15th of July. The letter did not say what the meeting was about. It didn't need to. The ministry was reforming in the aftermath of the tournament revelations, and Fudge's position was wobbling badly under the weight of what his department had failed to catch, and the Order of the Phoenix, which Harry knew about because Dumbledore had told him in May, which had been a significant conversation, was reorganizing its approach to what was coming. What was coming was Voldemort, reconsolidating. Incomplete from the graveyard failure but not stopped. Not gone. The Aurors were tracking signs, movements, disappearances, the particular quality of quiet that preceded something loud. Apolline read the letter over his shoulder, which she did because she always did and he'd stopped noticing. "The 15th. She said. "Yes. Jean-Pierre has a ministry meeting in London on the 16th. She said. "We can arrange travel." "I know what the meeting is about," Harry said. "Mostly," So do I, she said, sitting down. The Order wants to formalize its relationship with you. Bring you properly into what's being organized. They want me to be a piece, Harry said. They want you to be a person, Apolline said, with the careful precision of someone who had spent 5 years managing this distinction. Whether they'll succeed at wanting that is another question. Harry looked at the letter. I'll go, he said. And I'll be whatever I am when I get there. Which is what I always am. Apolline smiled. Yes, she said. It is. Fleur found him on the coast path that afternoon, which was where he went when he needed to think and which she knew, and she came without the book she usually carried, which meant she was coming to talk rather than to be near him while they both did separate things, which was a distinction that mattered. She sat on the rock he was already sitting on and looked at the sea and said, Ministry meeting. Yes. I know about the Order, she said. Maman told me last winter. I know, he said. She told me she'd told you. Fleur was quiet for a moment. I want to be involved, she said. Okay, he said. She turned to look at him. You're not going to argue. Why would I argue? Because it's dangerous, she said. And you are. She stopped. Chose the right word. Careful. With me. You're 18, Fleur, he said. And you are one of the most talented witches I have ever seen, and I have seen Hermione practice transfiguration for 4 hours straight because she was 3% below her own standard. He looked at her. If you want to be involved, you should be involved. I wasn't going to be the person who told you otherwise. She studied him. Most people would say it's dangerous. Most people, Harry said, are not talking to you. I am. He paused. You know it's dangerous. You don't need me to tell you. You need me to take the opinion seriously, which I do, and to not make your involvement conditional on my comfort, which I won't. Fleur was quiet for a longer moment than usual. The sea went on doing its 3 shades of blue arrangement below them, and the lavender smell moved in the breeze, and somewhere above them a kestrel called twice. I have thought, she said carefully, about what I said in November. On the grounds. So have I, he said. And I have thought about what you said. The compass, he said. The compass, she confirmed. She was looking at the sea, but he could see the line of her jaw, the quality of attention she was paying to the words. I think I was waiting for something to change. Some threshold. Some point at which the years between us stopped being relevant, and the rest of it could. She paused. But that is not how it works. Is it? No, he said. The years will always be what they are. The difference between 18 and 15 will become the difference between 21 and 18, and then 25 and 22, and none of those are the same as the others, and none of them are the point. The point being, she said, that we know each other. He said. Exactly. And we've known each other exactly for 5 years. And that doesn't have a threshold. It just is. Fleur turned to look at him. The afternoon light was doing what it always did at this hour on this path, laying itself across the white stone and the blue water with a particular generosity. She looked at him with the real expression, the one without anything over it, and said, Yes. One word. Just yes. Harry looked back at her and said nothing because nothing was what the moment needed, and they sat in the good silence they'd been building since he was 9 years old, and it was enough, and it was the beginning of something and the continuation of something else, and it was, above all, simply true. Gabrielle appeared from behind a rock 20 meters up the path where she had clearly been sitting for some time. Finalement, she said, with supreme satisfaction. Were you listening? Fleur demanded. I was drawing, Gabrielle said, holding up her sketchbook as evidence. The kestrel. I happen to be here. You happen to be here, Fleur said flatly. The kestrel is very interesting, Gabrielle said, and showed them the drawing, which was excellent, and which also happened to include the 2 of them on their rock below, very small, very clearly themselves. Harry looked at the drawing. That's good, he said. You've gotten better. I practice, Gabrielle said, with the same serene confidence she applied to all statements of fact. She came and sat on Harry's other side and looked at the drawing with them. I've been drawing this for 4 years, she said, waiting for it to be accurate. 4 years, Harry said. The composition needed both of you looking the same direction, she said. It took a while. Fleur made a sound that was somewhere between exasperation and a laugh and leaned across Harry to look at the drawing properly. Gabrielle leaned in from the other side. Harry sat between them in the afternoon light above the Mediterranean and felt the bond, both threads of it, Fleur's and Gabrielle's, strong and warm and entirely distinct from each other, the older one that was becoming something else, and the younger one that was different in kind but equal in weight, and thought, this is the thing. This right here. This is what was being built. He hadn't known it when he was 9, standing in Diagon Alley trying to find the apothecary. He'd been starting to know it by the time he was 10 on the coast path. He knew it fully now, sitting on a cliff above the sea with the 2 people his magic had recognized before he had words for any of it. He knew it the way a compass knew north. The ministry meeting on the 15th was in a conference room on the 4th floor of the ministry building, with Dumbledore at one end of the table and Kingsley Shacklebolt at the other and a collection of Order members in between, including Moody, the real one, recently recovered and extremely suspicious of everything, which Harry respected, and Sirius, who had been exonerated in March through the combination of Pettigrew's capture and a legal argument that Apolline's legal contact had apparently co-written, and which had been airtight enough that even the minister couldn't resist it. Sirius had met Harry twice since the exoneration and was still in the process of working out how to be in a relationship with the godson he'd missed the formative years of, which Harry gave him room to navigate because it was complicated and Sirius was trying, and trying in good faith was the most Harry needed from anyone. Apolline was also in the meeting, which Dumbledore had invited and which several other Order members clearly hadn't expected but accepted because Apolline's presence in a room made alternatives seem significantly less appealing. The meeting covered the Order's current intelligence on Voldemort's movements, consolidating, recruiting, the Dementors' loyalty shifting, the Ministry's political situation unstable enough to be exploitable. It covered plans, defenses, the protective networks that needed rebuilding. Then it covered Harry. Specifically, the meeting covered what the Order expected of Harry, which was, and Harry listened to this with the careful attention he brought to all things, a version of the role Dumbledore had always had in mind. Central. Symbolic. The boy who lived as a rallying point. Prepared, yes, trained, yes, but in the service of a specific narrative that had been running since a Halloween night in Godric's Hollow. Harry waited until the presentation was finished. Then he said, "No." The room was quiet. "Not the whole of it," he said. "The training, yes. The preparation, yes. The intelligence sharing, absolutely. But the rallying point, the symbol, the specific role in the specific narrative." He looked at Dumbledore. "I'm not a piece, Professor. I've told you that." "Harry," Dumbledore said gently. "I'll fight," Harry said. "I've been preparing to fight since I was 10 years old. I know what's coming and I'm not afraid of it. But I fight as myself, with the people I choose, using what I've built." He looked around the table. "Not as an instrument of a story someone else wrote." Moody made a sound that might have been approval. "The prophecy," one of the other Order members began. "The prophecy says either can live while the other survives," Harry said. "I know it. Dumbledore told me in May. It says one of us will kill the other. It does not say how. It does not say when. It does not say in the service of what structure or under whose authority, or according to whose plan." He let that sit for a moment. "I will end this war. That was always going to happen. But I will do it on my terms, with my people, and I need this room to understand that as a fact rather than a position." The room was quiet for a different reason than before. Kingsley Shacklebolt looked at Dumbledore. "He's right," he said. "I know," Dumbledore said. He'd been watching Harry with that expression, the genuine one, the one that had appeared the first time Harry told him he was going to do things differently, And it was there again now, that surprised and not surprised quality, the look of a man watching something he'd set in motion arrive at a destination he hadn't drawn on his map. "I will work with the order," Harry said. "Cooperatively and honestly and with full information sharing in both directions. But cooperatively means I am not under command. It means my approach is mine and I am not required to simplify it to fit a narrative." "What is your approach?" Shacklebolt asked. Genuinely asking, not testing. Harry looked at him. "Kill the Horcruxes," he said. "Then kill Voldemort. I know what the Horcruxes are. I know 3 of the locations. I have a working theory on the others." He paused. "I have been researching since 3rd year." The silence was of a different quality again. Several people exchanged glances. Dumbledore was very still. "You know about the Horcruxes," Dumbledore said. "The soul-splitting," Harry said. "The anchors?" "Yes. I found the theory in a text in the Delacour library, and it explains several things about Voldemort's behavior and survivability that nothing else adequately explained, and I've been cross-referencing since then." He looked at Apolline. "Your library is very thorough." "I know," Apolline said, the smallest possible smile. Dumbledore looked at Harry for a long moment. Then he opened his hands, an uncharacteristic gesture, open rather than folded, and said, "All right. Tell me what you know." Harry told him. The meeting went 3 hours over schedule. When it was done, the Order's plan looked significantly different from what it had been when they started, and Harry had agreed to work with Dumbledore specifically on Horcrux identification and had written down 12 conditions for his involvement that Shacklebolt had read and approved and which Moody had called the most sensible document he'd read since the original Order Charter. Sirius caught him in the corridor afterward and said, "James would have just blown the whole thing up." "I know," Harry said. "I thought about that. Decided against it." Sirius looked at him with the expression of a man who had loved James Potter completely, and was now meeting someone who was both the same and entirely different. "You're a bit terrifying, actually," he said warmly. "Apolline says I'm thorough," Harry said. Sirius laughed, a real laugh, loose and surprised. "Yeah," he said. "That'll do it." The next year and a half was the war in practice, which meant it was nothing like any story about war Harry had ever read and everything like what war actually was, long periods of careful preparation punctuated by moments of extreme and sudden violence, followed by more careful preparation. He hunted Horcruxes the way he approached everything, methodically, with the people he needed and not more people than he needed. Hermione for the research, which she did with the focused ferocity of someone who had found the one problem worth all her considerable ability. Ron for the logistical and human element, because Ron was better at people than either of them, and that mattered more in a Horcrux hunt than it might seem. Neville, whose map of Hogwarts proved essential when it became clear one Horcrux was inside the castle. Fleur and Gabrielle were not in the hunt directly because this was a decision Harry made and maintained regardless of Fleur's opinion of it, which she expressed at considerable length, and which he heard fully and acknowledged fully and didn't change his position on. "You're keeping us out," she said. "I'm keeping you available," he said. "There's a difference." "That is a semantic. The hunt is small on purpose," he said. "The smaller it is, the harder it is to track. The moment we add more people, we're visible. When this ends, and it ends soon, I'm certain of it, what comes after is going to need people who haven't been in the most exposed position." He looked at her steadily. "I need you available for after, Fleur. You and Gabrielle both." She held his gaze for a long time. He could feel through the bond that she understood the logic and hated it, which was entirely fair. "I am not fragile," she said. "I know," he said. "This is not about fragility. This is about strategy, and I need you to trust my strategic thinking the same way I trust yours." Another long look. "Then, you have 6 months," she said. "If it is not done in 6 months, I am coming regardless." "Fair," he said. "It took 4 months and 3 weeks. The Horcruxes went one by one through the autumn and into winter. The locket, which required getting into Umbridge's ministry office during a period of maximum ministry dysfunction that Harry timed deliberately and executed with Hermione's planning and Ron's particular gift for managing the human elements of breaking into ministry buildings, which turned out to be a transferable skill. The cup, which required Gringotts and a dragon, which Harry declined to think of as his fault. The diadem, which Neville found because no one knew the room of requirement better than Neville by that point in his life. The snake, which would be last. The ring had been destroyed already, by Dumbledore, 2 years ago, at cost to himself, and the information about it had come out in pieces that Harry assembled carefully. The diary was gone since second year, which left the snake and the fragment no one wanted to talk about, the one in Harry himself, which Dumbledore had told him at the end of fifth year with a care and gravity that Harry had received with the particular stillness of someone who had already been moving toward this conclusion for months, and was relieved to have it confirmed. "I know," he'd said. Dumbledore had looked at him. "You know. The transfer at Godric's Hollow makes sense structurally if a piece of his soul attached to the nearest living vessel," Harry said. "Which was me. The connection we've had. The Parseltongue, that's not inherited, it's transferred. I've been carrying it for 15 years. Harry, I know what it means," Harry said. "In terms of what has to happen." He was very calm. Not performing calm, actually calm, the way you're calm when you've looked at a thing from every angle and found it survivable. "And I know there's a difference between what has to happen to the Horcrux, and what has to happen to me. The killing curse kills the soul fragment, not necessarily the host, not if the host has." He paused. "Not if the host has strong enough soul anchors of their own." Dumbledore was looking at him with something that was close to awe, which Harry found slightly uncomfortable. "Where did you find that theory?" "The Veela histories," Harry said. "The accounts of the true Clover configuration. The bond doesn't just strengthen the people in it. It anchors them. Creates. The word the oldest texts use is el-anchor de el-aim. Soul anchor." He met Dumbledore's eyes. "The bond is my soul anchor. Both threads of it." Dumbledore was quiet for a very long time. Outside his office window, Fawkes sang one pure note and stopped. "You've been preparing for this since," Dumbledore started. "Since I found the fragment theory," Harry said. "Third year. And you're not." Dumbledore stopped again. "I'm not afraid," Harry said. And then, because it was Dumbledore and because Dumbledore was not his enemy, "I trust the bond. I trust what it is. And I trust the people in it." He paused. "So no. I'm not afraid." The final confrontation happened at Hogwarts, because of course it did. Voldemort came with his army on a night in March when the snow had just stopped and the grounds were white and still and the castle's wards were doing everything Apolline and Dumbledore and the Order could ask of them, which was considerable. He came with Dementors and Death Eaters and the specific confidence of someone who believes their opponent has been weakened by their own preparations, because the Horcrux removals had all been quiet and there had been no announcement, and Voldemort did not yet know what he had lost. Harry let him come. He had been at Hogwarts for 3 days, quietly, with Hermione and Ron and Neville and the people of the D.A., Dumbledore's army, which had spent 3 years becoming something more than its name, and which showed when it mattered. He had been in contact with Apolline daily. He had been in contact with Fleur hourly, which the bond would have managed regardless of whether they were in contact. Fleur and Gabrielle were at Hogwarts. He'd owed them the day he was certain it was coming, 2 words, "come now." They'd arrived that afternoon. Gabrielle was 15 and already formidable in ways that Beauxbatons was still catching up to, and she'd walked into the castle with the same open, serious expression she'd had at 9 when she dropped her paper bag in Diagon Alley, the expression of someone who was exactly where they expected to be and was fine about it. Fleur had come into the great hall and found Harry and looked at him with the expression that was only his, the real one, and said nothing because nothing was required. "You came," he said, because he wanted to say it. "Obviously," she said, because that was always going to be her answer. The battle was real and terrible and full of things Harry didn't let himself process until it was over. People hurt, people brave, the castle defending itself with the ancient magic it had been storing for 1,000 years, the DA holding the interior while Order members and Ministry Aurors managed the exterior. Neville, with the sword of Gryffindor he'd apparently always had an appointment with, took the snake in the moment it needed taking, which was the moment it happened and not a second before, because Neville's timing had always been better than anyone gave him credit for. Harry stood in the Great Hall and felt the Horcrux count become complete, and looked at the door that Voldemort was behind and thought, now. He went out alone. This had always been the plan, or rather, it had always been the fact underneath the plan, the part no plan could change. The prophecy was clear. One of them, in the end. The soul anchor he was carrying had to go, and it had to go through Voldemort's magic, and there was no version of this that wasn't Harry walking toward it directly and deliberately. The grounds were white and still. The snow had the particular quality of snow after a battle, disturbed in places, undisturbed in others, the disturbance telling stories he didn't want to read right now. Voldemort was at the edge of the Forbidden Forest, where his forces had retreated when the castle's defenses had held. He turned when Harry came through the gate, and his expression was the one Harry had seen on powerful people his whole life, the specific look of someone encountering an adversary and not being certain they're the more powerful one, which Voldemort was not accustomed to feeling. "Harry Potter," Voldemort said. His voice was the same quality as his presence, unavoidable, designed to fill space. "Tom," Harry said. The name landed. It always did with people who had decided their name was something else. A reminder of the original thing, the human thing, stripped of all the architecture they'd built around it. Voldemort's eyes went sharp. "You've been busy," Voldemort said. "My Horcruxes." "Yes," Harry said. "All of them?" "All of them," Harry said. Something moved across Voldemort's face that was not quite emotion but was its structural equivalent, the recognition of a miscalculation at the deepest level, the kind that doesn't have a remedy because it's too late for remedies. He'd built his immortality on a distributed soul, and someone had been quietly, methodically, without announcement or drama, taking it apart. "You have been planning this," Voldemort said. "Since I was 11, Harry said. "More seriously, since I was 13. "You are 16 years old," Voldemort said. The contempt in it was real, but there was something underneath the contempt, that sharp, clear unease, the thing Harry had seen in Lucius Malfoy in a corridor, and in Dolores Umbridge in a ministry hearing room, and in every person who had looked at him and expected something manageable and gotten something else. "I know how old I am," Harry said. "It's not relevant." Voldemort raised his wand. Harry did not raise his in the same motion. He raised it differently, not in the dual posture that dueling masters taught, and that everyone expected, but in the particular way he'd been working on for 3 years with Apolline, who had spent those 3 years teaching him the old magic alongside the standard magic, the magic that predated the Ministry and predated Hogwarts, and predated the division of Wizarding Society into competing factions. The Veela magic that was now his to use, not because he was Veela but because the bond had made him a channel for it, something the oldest texts had noted as a feature of the true clover configuration, that the mate's own magic became compatible with, and capable of drawing on, the Veela fire. He felt it now. Both threads of the bond, Fleur's and Gabrielle's, and through them something ancient and enormous and warm, the kind of warmth that a fire is at its core before it becomes anything else, pure potential, pure transformation. Voldemort cast. Harry didn't block. He'd studied the killing curse long enough to know that blocking was the wrong approach. You couldn't absorb it, and you couldn't redirect it, you could only be hit by it or not. The soul fragment in him meant he had to be hit by it. That had always been the calculus. He let it hit. The cold of it was complete and total, like being submerged in something absolute, and then, and this was the part the theory had predicted and which he trusted and which turned out to be exactly right, the soul anchor held. The bond held. The piece of Voldemort's soul that had been riding in Harry for 16 years caught the killing curse the way a lightning rod catches lightning, pulled it out of him cleanly, and was gone. Harry hit the ground. The world went white. He came back because of course he came back. He was on the grounds, cold, the snow real and present under his hands when he pushed himself up, and the bond was there. Both threads, sharp and immediate, Fleur's carrying the quality of someone who has just experienced something through a connection they would not choose to live without. Gabrielle's carrying the same, but wrapped in the particular certainty of someone who had always known this exact moment was going to resolve the way it was resolving. He stood up. Voldemort was still there. The killing curse had rebounded. The sole anchor taking the fragment meant the curse had no lodging point in Harry, had nowhere to go, and gone back to its source the same way it had in Godric's Hollow, except this time there was nothing left of Voldemort that could anchor him to the living world. No Horcruxes. No tethers. Just a man with a wand and no more protection than any other man with a wand, which was no protection at all. Voldemort looked at him. For the first time Harry had ever seen, he looked genuinely uncertain. Not afraid. Fear required acknowledging the possibility of loss, and Voldemort's psychology had been constructed around the impossibility of loss for 50 years, but uncertain. The foundation of the architecture had gone, and the architecture was still standing but didn't know it yet. Expelliarmus, Harry said. Clean. Simple. The wand flew. It had always been his spell, not because it was the most powerful one available but because it was the right one, the one that said this ends here without saying and so do you, and the distinction was important to Harry for reasons he thought about clearly and kept. Voldemort, wandless, with no Horcruxes and a rebounded killing curse and a body that was more borrowed reconstruction than original, fell. He did not fall dramatically. He did not fall in the way that villains fell in stories, with declarations and final speeches. He fell the way any person falls when the thing sustaining them is gone, just down. And the face that looked up from the snow was, briefly and inescapably, the face of Tom Riddle, who had been a boy once, and who had made choices, and who was done. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Fleur was there, coming across the grounds fast, and behind her Gabrielle, and Harry turned toward them and the bond was blazing, both threads of it, enormous with the specific intensity of people who have just survived something that was close, and the warmth of it was the warmth of the Veela fire at its source, the thing that had always been there, that the bond had always been. Fleur reached him and stopped a foot away and looked at him, all of him, a fast and thorough accounting, and then said, "You went down." "I came back," he said. "You went down," she said again, sharper. "The soul anchor worked," he said. "Both threads." "I felt it, I felt." He stopped, because what he'd felt was them, both of them, the bond holding him to the living world with the strength of something 5 years old and thoroughly built, and saying it felt inadequate to the fact of it. Fleur looked at him for a moment that was both very long and not long enough. Then she crossed the remaining foot between them and put both arms around him and held on, and Harry put his arms around her and held back, and Gabrielle came and put her arms around both of them, and the three of them stood in the snow on the Hogwarts grounds in the early morning of a day that was the end of something and the beginning of something else, and simply were, for a moment, exactly what they'd been becoming since a Thursday morning in Diagon Alley. The castle was lit above them. The grounds were full of people coming out through the gates, voices rising, disbelief and relief and grief for the ones who hadn't made it through, all of it real and necessary and human. Somewhere, someone started to cheer. Gabrielle said into Harry's shoulder, "I told you. You tell me a lot of things," Harry said. "Most of them are correct," she said. "All of them," Fleur said, still not letting go. "All of them are correct." "Enfin," Gabrielle said, satisfied, and didn't move. The aftermath was months. The ministry rebuilt, which it did slowly and with the particular difficulty of an institution that had been compromised at too many levels for a quick fix. Kingsley Shacklebolt became minister, which was the best available outcome and was engineered partly by Apolline and partly by the political network she'd been building for 6 years on the specific understanding that when this war ended, the peace needed to be structured carefully or the next war would simply be a waiting condition. Lucius Malfoy's inquiry concluded. The evidence was thorough and the case was solid and the verdict was complicated, not the prison sentence some wanted, because the Wisengamot's politics were not that simple, but a stripping of influence that was in many ways more complete than Azkaban, because Azkaban could be survived and emerged from. Whereas the kind of political and social erasure that Apolline had been quietly engineering for 2 years was not reversible. Lucius Malfoy could not play the long game anymore because Apolline had quietly removed the board. He knew it. Harry suspected he knew it. That was enough. Draco was a separate question, which Harry approached separately. Not forgiveness. Forgiveness was Draco's to work toward and wasn't Harry's to grant, but the acknowledgement that Draco had made different choices in the final year than he might have made, and that choices mattered, and that the future should be available to people who were making better choices. Harry said this to no one except Hermione, who agreed, and Ron, who needed a day to think about it, and then agreed. Sirius recovered from the year, which had been hard on him in ways he didn't always say directly but that Harry had gotten good at reading. They built something together in the aftermath, not the relationship they would have had if things had been different, but the one they actually had, which was specific and warm and theirs. Sirius was not a replacement parent, he was Sirius, which was better. Hermione went back to finish her education, because of course she did, and became subsequently the most aggressively overqualified Auror in British ministry history, which was exactly what she'd intended and no one could argue with the results. Ron went into Auror training and was remarkable at it, because Ron's ability to read a room and manage the human variables of any given situation translated directly into the best kind of Auror work, and he was happy, which was the most important thing, and which he was. Neville stayed at Hogwarts, eventually. He came back to teach herbology and then to run it, and the greenhouses under his care became something extraordinary, and the students who passed through them came out understanding plants and also, somehow, through Neville's particular gift, understanding themselves. Harry went back to France. He went in June, 2 months after the final battle, when the immediate aftermath had settled into the medium-term aftermath, and he could breathe again. The Delacour house received him the way it had always received him, completely, without ceremony, and he stood in the kitchen doorway on the first morning and smelled bread and coffee and the particular morning quality of a house on the Mediterranean coast, and felt something in him that had been held tight for a very long time let go. Jean-Pierre was at the table reading his newspaper. He looked up when Harry came in and gave him the nod, the particular one, the same one he'd been giving him since Harry was 9 and had correctly identified a kestrel, that said everything it said without words. Harry sat down. "Coffee?" Jean-Pierre said. "Yes," Harry said. "Please." They sat in companionable quiet while the coffee was poured and the bread finished its latest iteration of being extraordinary. Apolline came in from the garden with something she'd been cutting and stopped when she saw Harry, and the look she gave him was the one from Diagon Alley, that precise, measuring attention, and then she crossed the kitchen and put one hand briefly on his shoulder and said nothing, which was exactly right. Gabrielle came down the stairs at 8 because she couldn't sleep past 8 regardless of what time she'd gone to bed, which was a fact as constant as the tides, and sat next to Harry and began, immediately, to talk about her current project at Beaux Batons, which was a theory about Veela fire generation that she'd been developing since she was 12 and which had recently attracted the attention of a magical theorist in Lyon who wanted to collaborate. "He is very smart," Gabrielle said, "but he doesn't understand the emotional component. He thinks it is purely structural. Is it not?" Harry asked. "Nothing is purely structural," Gabrielle said. "Show me something purely structural." "The ministry," Harry said. Gabrielle looked at him. Then she conceded this with a slight tilt of her head. "The ministry is purely structural," she said. "And look at the state of it." "Fair point," Harry said. "I will tell the theorist in Lyon that I have confirmed his error," she said, and went to get coffee with the serenity of someone whose morning had just gotten better. Fleur came down at 8:20, fully dressed, book under her arm, hair down, and stopped in the kitchen doorway and looked at Harry the way she'd been looking at him for almost 7 years now, The look that had stopped being an assessment sometime around his 4th year and had become something else, something that was its own complete language. He looked back. "Morning," he said. "Bonjour," she said, and her expression was doing the thing where the composed surface was not quite in place yet and the honest thing underneath was visible, and she was not trying to fix it. "Bread's ready," Jean-Pierre said without looking up from his newspaper. Fleur came and sat across from Harry and accepted the coffee her mother handed her and opened her book. She was not reading. He was not watching her pretend to read. This was a well-established domestic arrangement. After a while, she said, without looking up from the page she wasn't reading, "I've been offered a position." "At the ministry?" he said. "No," she said. "Gringotts. International relations. They want someone who can work across the French and British branches and who has," she paused, "sufficient political understanding." "Apolline's contacts," Harry said. "Partially," Fleur said. "Partially my own, at this point." "What are you thinking?" She looked up from her book. "That I want it," she said. "And that it means London part of the year." Harry looked at her for a moment. "I've been thinking about where I want to be," he said. "Going forward." "London," Fleur said. Not a question. "Some of the year," he said. "And France." "Split." He looked at her steadily. "It works if we're both splitting." She studied him. "Are we making a plan?" she said. "We've always been making a plan," he said. "We're just at the part where it gets specific." Gabrielle looked up from her coffee. "Finally," she said. "I have been waiting for this conversation since I was 11. "You were 11 for approximately 5 minutes, Fleur said. "I was 11 long enough to know this conversation was coming," Gabrielle said. Apolline was doing something at the counter that required her full attention and absolutely did not require her to be smiling. Jean-Pierre turned a page. Harry looked at Fleur across the breakfast table, in the kitchen of a house on a hillside above the Mediterranean that was his as much as anyone's, and thought about Diagon Alley in July and a compass settling and 2 girls and a paper bag on cobblestones and 17 syllables in Old French and a graveyard that a cup didn't go to and a soul anchor that held in the cold white moment that everything depended on. He thought about North. He thought about 6 years of knowing exactly who they were to each other and being patient with the process of it. "So," Fleur said, her expression the real one, the one with nothing over it. "London." "And France," he said. "Split," she said. "Split," he confirmed. She looked at him for one more moment, and then she smiled, the real one, the one that happened rarely enough that it was always a specific event, and looked back at her book, which she still wasn't reading. Harry drank his coffee. The morning light came through the kitchen windows the way it always had, warm and golden and unhurried, and the bread was extraordinary and the sea was somewhere below the hillside doing its 3 shades of blue arrangement, and the bond was what it had always been, steady and sure and pointing, without question, in exactly one direction. North. Always north.